one of the most anticipated anime of the spring season, which had Atelier, arrives this April. In a world where magic is something you are either born with or not, Coco is an ordinary girl who has always dreamed of becoming a witch. But when a single forbidden spell changes her life forever, she is suddenly thrown into a hidden world of magic, secrets, and danger. As she begins her apprenticeship, Coco must uncover the truth behind magic itself before it takes everything from her. What trials await our young apprentice as she struggles to undo the consequences of her actions? Let's find out. The story began with a series of questions, such as whether an athlete was already an athlete from the moment they were born. What about astronauts or even pop stars? You could not know what you would become until you had grown up. And so, how was it for witches? Is it the same for them as well? A young girl was then shown. She walked by the river, carrying a wash basin with her. A deer merely glanced in her direction as she busied herself pouring out the water. She was focused on doing the laundry and scrubbing the clothes there. When she noticed the deer, the child apologized for the mess she had caused. After that, she walked away carrying the freshly washed laundry and told it not to worry. The dirt would disappear soon enough. It was, after all, a magic spring. When she went out of the water, the river suddenly began to glow. The deer's ears suddenly stood upright, and it drank from the river. Upon noticing it, the young girl remarked on how beautiful it was, and how it never grew old. Magic truly was astonishing. The world was filled with magic. It brought blessings to everyone. It was hard to imagine life without it. Yet she did not know how magic truly worked. Only witches can cast spells, after all. The girl climbed up onto the roof to hang the laundry. She insisted that people like her could only benefit from whatever came their way. You could not simply become a witch just like that. While holding a book and sitting there on the roof, the only thing she could do was wish that she had been born a witch. She then glanced at the blanket she had washed. She stood up and took hold of it. She spoke to the freshly washed sheet, clean and white, and ordered it to become her cloak of flight. She pretended to be a witch casting a spell, but it simply returned to hanging there. The girl suddenly felt embarrassed. Moments later, a strong gust of wind surged through. Because of that, her laundry was swept into the air. She could not believe what was happening and chased after it. She told it not to give in to the wind. That was not the kind of flying she had meant. As she watched the cloth being carried away, she noticed something else above. She could not believe what her eyes were seeing. A flying carriage passed right in front of her. She was happy to see that it was a Pegasus carriage. The carriage then landed nearby. She was completely shocked that it had landed in their village. She hurried down, saying that she had never seen a Pegasus carriage come down before. She shouted and repeatedly called for her mother, telling her to look outside. She ran closer toward the carriage. When the door opened, she looked for her mother. However, someone was standing right in front of the doorway. The girl apologized, saying she had not noticed that he was there. The man smiled and said it was fine. It was his fault for standing directly in front of the door. It turned out to be a shop filled with many different kinds of fabric. There were women shopping in the place, and in the man's view, he had arrived when the shop was busy. One woman asked whether wood sorrel embroidery was still in fashion. Her companion replied that she thought it was lovely. It made her look proper, even intelligent, in fact. But she then pointed to the Harian lace. The castle markets had run out of it long ago. The woman then said that bringing the carriage there had indeed been the right decision. Another woman commented on how beautiful the small hamlets there were. The girl was startled when she heard that. She was amazed to realize that they were the ones who had arrived aboard the Pegasus carriage she had seen. She looked at the man beside her, feeling excited. However, he insisted that he was not with them, and so he wished she would stop looking at him like that. A customer then asked whether they still had lace like the one she was holding. The shop owner replied that they still did. She opened a chest and said to wait a moment while she looked for it. She then called out to Coco to help her. She noticed the man standing beside Coco and asked what he needed from there. He replied that he needed smoke-colored cloth and had brought the measurements with him, though if they were busy, he could simply come back another time. Young Coco offered that she could be the one to cut it for him instead. He could hardly believe it when she handed him the paper. Her mother spoke proudly, saying that Coco knew everything about the shop inside and out. He was impressed by that. Coco then suddenly asked her mother if it would be all right, once she was done, if she could go outside to look at the carriage. Her mother replied by reminding her that she had already warned her about playing with things that belonged to others. If she damaged it, there would be no witch there who could fix it. The child answered that she would not touch it. She only wanted to look. She pleaded and promised that she would stop bringing up her desire to learn magic. Her mother had no choice in the end. She agreed, but on the condition that Coco finish her work quickly. Coco jumped with joy. She hurriedly picked up the cloth, clearly excited. The man behind her found this puzzling. Coco happily spread the fabric out on the table. She carefully adjusted its position, then used chalk to mark the measurements. Before drawing the line, she took a deep breath. After that, she drew a single straight line. She let out a sigh of relief afterward. She was startled when she realized that the man was now standing right in front of her, staring at what she had done. She panicked because he was standing so close. Curiosity crept in as she wondered if he had been watching her all this time. The man pulled the fabric and praised her concentration, as well as how steady her hands were. He was impressed by how precise the measurements were and how perfectly straight the cut was. He said he had no idea that village had such an artisan. He added that it was real magic. Coco immediately denied it, saying that was not true and that he was mistaken. Magic, she said, was something sparkly and mysterious. It was wonderful and priceless. More than that, magic was beautiful and precious. The excitement was plainly visible on her face as she explained this. However, she caught herself and asked what she was even talking about. The man noticed her fondness for magic, and so he asked her why. Coco looked over and shared that when she was really little, her mother had taken her to a festival at the castle. There, she had bought a slim book from a witch who was wearing a mask. The man grew curious about the slim book she mentioned. Coco laughed and said it looked handmade. That witch had called out to her while sitting off to the side, asking whether she would like to buy a picture book about magic. Young Coco had been deeply interested. She said that she loved picture books, even though she had no idea what the witch meant by magic. The witch explained that magic was the miracle that brought life and vibrancy to their world. Pegasus carriages soaring across the sky, springs of pure water that never ran dry, even the cobblestone roads beneath her feet gently glowing as she walked. All of those things, the witch said, were magic. Hearing that, young Coco was overjoyed and utterly amazed. She said that magic was the best and that she loved it. The witch agreed and offered to sell her the book he was holding, even saying he would give her a wand for free along with it. When Coco returned to her mother was shocked to learn that a witch had persuaded her to buy it. Her mom had handed over the money because she wanted to buy a roasted strawberry treat. Even so, Coco excitedly showed her the book she had purchased, saying it was a picture book about magic. She then searched her pocket and proudly showed that the magic person had even given her a free wand. She showed it off with pride, explaining that it was also a pen and that it even came with ink. Because of that, she declared that when she grew up, she would become a witch and make the world vibrant as well. However, her mother did not allow it. Coco was shocked and asked why she could not. Her mother explained that she could not become a witch because one had to be born a witch in order to become one. Ordinary people like them just don't have what it takes. Coco pointed out that when she walked on the ground, it glowed. Her mother pulled her along and said they were going home. If the ground continued to glow all the way back to their house, then perhaps she really could use magic after all. However, once they had moved farther away from the palace, her every step on the way home no longer glowed. Coco became teary-eyed as she said that ever since then, she had desperately wanted to see magic. Because of that, she could not rid herself of the possibility that she might be able to use it. She added that she had thought that by spending all her money to buy that little book, it might show her how to use magic. But it did not. The man fell into thought upon hearing this. He was curious about the witch who had sold books at the castle festival. And so, if it was all right with her, he asked whether she might be able to tell him more about that. However, their conversation was interrupted when a sudden loud noise came from outside. They immediately looked out the window to see what it was, since the sound had been so intense. It turned out that something had happened to the Pegasus carriage parked outside, as smoke was rising from it. Because of that, Coco ran outside to see what was going on. Two children were pointing fingers at each other there. The curly-haired one insisted that they had not even touched it at all, saying it had just suddenly fallen over. Another child pointed at him and said that was not true, claiming that Tannerl had been crawling underneath it. He became irritated and called him a tattletale. The boy added that his head had hit the bottom, which was why the carriage had toppled. Coco simply listened to their explanations. She then looked up when the owners of the carriage suddenly reacted. The women could not believe what had happened. They demanded to know what had been done to their carriage, saying it belonged to their father. They asked what they were supposed to do now. Coco's mother approached the children and took it upon herself to apologize on behalf of the village kids. She said their behavior was completely unacceptable. The women, however, were irritated and said that an apology alone would not get them home. In their anger, they accused the bumpkins of planning to strand them and take their valuables. The children replied that they would never do such a thing. Someone then cut into the conversation. He had his hand on the carriage and offered his services. It was the man Coco had been speaking to earlier. He said that the damage did not appear to be serious. One of the women asked who he was. He apologized and said to allow him to cap off his attire. Coco was utterly shocked when he put on a witch's hat and introduced himself as Kifri the witch at their service. When the people there saw his hat, it confirmed for them that he truly was a witch. They then asked whether he could fix it. He replied that he merely needed to recast the spell on the carriage's baseboard. Of course, that was a little difficult outdoors. Coco suddenly spoke up and said that he could use their workshop. Her mother had not expected that at all. Even so, Coco looked at her and said that it would surely make them happy. Her mother noticed how red her face had become, how obvious it was that she truly wanted this. Coco could not keep still because he was a real, live witch, and that hardly ever happened in their area. On top of that, they might even get a chance to see it, the moment when he cast his spell. She imagined Kifri's cool figure as he floated while performing it. She could not stop herself from smiling just at the thought of that image. It was all so amazing. She smiled so widely that she felt her face might break. She spoke to her little smile muscles, telling them to stay right where they were. Kifri suddenly called out to her and asked if her name was indeed Coco. That snapped her out of her daydream. Kifri thanked her, saying that allowing him to use their workshop was most welcome. However, he wondered if he could make one more request, something she herself could help him with, and asked if that would be all right. Coco had not expected that. A short while later, she could be seen slumped and sitting outside the workshop door. The task she had been given was to guard the door. She was to make sure that no one peeked inside while he cast the spell. No one was to enter under any circumstances, no matter what happened. Tears welled up in her eyes as her hopes and dreams crumbled away. Her poor little smile muscles felt utterly betrayed. She wondered what was so wrong with simply watching. Magic existed all over the world, after all, and so she could not understand why the act of casting it was treated as such a great secret. Moments later, the two mischievous children came running by. Coco noticed them and followed after them. The two climbed up onto the roof, and Coco asked what they were doing there. They were annoyed at being caught, but were not too bothered once they realized it was only Coco. They insisted they were just going to peek through the skylight, thinking they might see what was happening inside. Coco could not allow that, and said it was not fair. If they were going to peek, then she should be able to as well. And so she climbed up and followed them. They were impressed by how easily she managed to get up there. Coco had them move aside so she could open it. However, once she did, something was blocking the view. Tannerl grew irritated that the curtain was closed. Because of that, the others suggested they just leave. Coco lowered her head, disappointed. A moment later, a blanket suddenly hit her on the head. She was startled and confused by what had happened. When she looked upward, she noticed that the blankets she had hung out to dry had flown from up there, from near the entrance leading inside. Because of that, she thought of climbing up there to get inside. She went down the ladder from above and peeked in. Guilt washed over her as she thought that she should not be doing this. Even so, she truly wanted to know what was happening. She knew it was not allowed, but she could not stop herself from taking a quick look. She saw Kifri busy inside. Using a pen, he was drawing something. He was completely focused on it. Coco was awestruck by what he was doing. She could not believe that he was simply drawing something like a pattern. She was amazed to learn that magic was cast using a pen. From what she witnessed, she realized that this was how it was done. Magic was not cast with words, but by drawing it. When Kifri finished, he called out to Coco. She was startled by that. Kifri knocked on the door to tell her that he was done, asking whether she was still there. He opened it and confirmed if Coco was indeed there. When he stepped out, he thanked her for her hard work. However, he wondered why she was so out of breath. As a result of Kifri casting his magic, The Pegasus carriage outside finally took flight. The people there were impressed by the sight. Meanwhile, Coco's mother found it strange that Coco had suddenly gone quiet beside her, especially once the carriage had flown off. Was she not excited? Earlier, she had not been able to stop talking about the carriage. Coco replied that she was fine. Her mother had never expected the day to come when she would not be jumping around over magic. Coco was deep in thought when Kifri suddenly appeared behind her. He was curious about what her mother had mentioned earlier. Startled, Coco suddenly shoved Kifri's belongings forcefully into his stomach. His things were there, including the cloth he needed. She then quickly hid behind her mother. Kifri thought to himself that he had still wanted to hear more about the book. However, Coco had already hidden away, too embarrassed to face him. Kifri felt that he simply had no luck with that. And so he took his leave. Perhaps, he said, they would meet again next time. He walked away, and Coco's mother waved to him in farewell. Once he was gone, Coco's mother let out a sigh, which puzzled Coco. Was there something she was worried about? Coco asked. Her mother replied that she had expected Coco to say that she wanted to go with that man. She had already lost her husband to illness, and she did not think she could bear losing Coco as well. Coco said that she would never let that happen. She would never leave her alone there. Her mother gently patted her on the head and thanked her, unable to believe she had such a kind and affectionate daughter. Coco smiled at that. That night, when Coco went to her room, she apologized to her mother. She said that even though she would not leave, there was still something she needed to try. She thought about all the patterns inside her picture book, along with the wand that had been included for free. Coco opened its casing and realized that the pen tip was not a coincidence at all. That pen itself was the wand. And so, she used a candle for light as she studied what was inside. She opened the book and looked closely at the drawings within. Using the pen, she copied them. Though her hands trembled at first, she gathered her courage and tried it. She busied herself drawing with the things she had bought when she was younger. Before long, she completed a pattern just like the one in the book. After she finished drawing it, she was startled when it began to glow in reaction. Something emerged from it. She could hardly believe what she was witnessing. She had never expected that she would be able to use magic. She jolted upright when she noticed the drawing glowing. She was really using magic now. She could not hide her joy as she ran around her room. This was real magic. She was overflowing with happiness and could not keep still. It was so incredible that she no longer knew what to do. She never imagined that the secret all along had simply been drawing. However, she grew uneasy when she remembered that she was not supposed to have looked at it. She wondered whether she would get into trouble if someone found out. Even so, she could not stop herself and decided she would try one more time. Just one more page. The scene shifted to the middle of a forest, where Kifri could be seen lying down with a floating flame beside him. That flame, too, was created by magic. Beneath it, the pattern used for it could be seen. As he lay there, Kifri still could not get the picture book Coco had mentioned earlier out of his mind. He could not believe that someone was selling something about magic to a child who knew nothing at all about that art. He suddenly sat upright when a realization struck him. Anxiety crept in as he grasped what that meant. Meanwhile, back with Coco, the paper suddenly caught fire as she drew a different pattern. Panic set in when she realized it was a fire spell. She immediately extinguished the flames and beat them out with her pillow until they were gone. She begged it to stop and not spread any further. A moment later, once the fire had completely vanished, she finally felt relief. That had been far too close. She fanned the paper with her hand to clear away the remaining smoke. After that, she noticed that she was starting to get used to it. She lined several sheets of paper across the floor. By that night, she had already drawn many different patterns. She realized that larger patterns were stronger than smaller ones, and that the ones she drew neatly lasted longer than those drawn messily. But drawing something large and neat was difficult. And yet, the visitor from earlier had made it look incredibly easy. As she thought about that, another realization came to her. She opened the book and carefully observed the drawings inside. After choosing a pattern, she placed the paper on top of it and tried tracing it. Just as she had thought, if she simply laid the paper over the book, she could see the pattern clearly and trace it perfectly. Because of the pattern she chose, something seeped out from the paper and spread throughout the area. Coco felt delighted when she completed it and wondered what kind of spell it might be. Suddenly, someone appeared behind her. It was Kifri, who immediately grabbed Coco. The pattern she had drawn on the paper flashed. Something strange emerged from it, and its range was immense. Kifri moved quickly while carrying Coco, rushing out through the upper door and jumping from the roof. A pattern could be seen drawn on the soles of Kifri's shoes, and because of that, he was able to float in the air while holding the young Coco. They were suddenly hurled upward as Coco's room began to glow brightly. While still in midair, Kifri held on to Coco and asked what she had drawn, what kind of magic she had used. Trembling with fear, she replied that she did not know. She had only traced one of the patterns from that book. He then asked whether the book was still inside, and she answered yes. When Coco looked down, she noticed her mother coming outside, searching for her. Coco shouted to call out to her. However, Kifri told her to stay still for now, saying that he did not want to drop her. Her mother called out to her while holding a lantern, worry clearly visible in her eyes. Moments later, something strange suddenly began happening to her feet. Crystals rapidly formed from the ground, crawling up her body, a sight that left her mother in shock. Coco could not believe what she was seeing. This could not be real. She cried out, "Mommy," as her body was completely turned into crystal. Still floating in the air, Coco could not hold back her tears. She apologized repeatedly, saying she did not know what she had done. Kifri replied that of course she did not know, and that was exactly why it was kept a secret. It was to prevent things like this from happening. The conjuring ink and the patterns used to cast seals were all that was needed. With those, anyone could use magic. Hiding that truth was the one great rule of the witches, and those who learned of it had to have their memories erased. Coco was stunned when she heard that from him. She suddenly kicked him in the chin as she twisted around and struggled free from his grip. Kifri told her to calm down and stop spinning like that, saying he could not hold on to her properly if she did. Even so, Coco did not stop and demanded that he let her go. She cried as she said that if he were to make her forget what had happened, then what would become of her mother? Kifri replied that if she could tell him what kind of seal she had drawn, then he might still be able to reverse it. But if that knowledge was missing, then he would not know how. Coco continued kicking as she answered that if what he was asking about was the picture book, she had read it countless times and knew it by heart. Kifri froze and realized that she was right. The book. If that book had been written by the very person he suspected, then he could not allow her to forget it. She was his only lead. He asked Coco whether she would be able to recognize the book if she saw it again, whether she could point out which page she had drawn from. Coco finally stopped and asked if she could find another copy of that book for him and show her the shape identical to what she had drawn, and if he saw it, would he be able to save her mother? Kifri insisted that there might still be hope. Coco clung to that and begged him. She cried and pleaded with him not to take away her memories. She swore that she would find that book again and that she would do everything she could to save her. As he held Coco, Kifri then asked whether she would honor that secret. Coco answered yes and made her promise. Kifri then asked whether she had the will to study. Coco was confused when he mentioned studying. Kifri added that if she was to retain the truth she had learned, then she was choosing to stand alongside them. That was her only option. From that moment on, Coco would become a witch. After that, the young Coco finally fell asleep. When she woke up, she noticed the sound of the wind. It turned out she was riding inside a flying carriage. Kifri was there with her, stretching as he said that he had hailed them a passing carriage. He thought it was far too cold for Coco to be up so high while wearing only her sleepwear, but told her not to worry because they were already close to their destination. He pointed it out through the window and said that was where they were headed, to his atelier, the new place where she would study. From above, Coco peered out and gazed at the place he had indicated. Kifri explained that he had scattered guard briar seeds around their home. The branches would grow quickly and become a fierce barrier. He thought it would be better to block careless or unwary visitors for now, until the true nature of that magic could be uncovered. He feared that it might take a long time before he could see his home again. Kifri glanced back and noticed that Coco was only hanging her head. When he asked what was wrong, she could not stop herself from tearing up. She insisted that she had made a promise. She had promised her mother that she would not leave her alone, that she would not abandon her. Kifri comforted her and told her not to blame herself. She could not have known that things would turn out that way. He brought her into his atelier and handed her something, telling her to use it to rinse her face. When he opened it, water flowed out. He urged her to cry it all out and embrace what lay ahead, because from that day on, this would be her new home. Coco looked at what he had handed her in confusion and asked what it was. Kifri replied that it was water, of course. However, Coco did not remember water being so round and floaty. Kifri suddenly remembered that he needed to get her a change of clothes, so he left her there for the moment to look for some. Coco had not expected to be left behind like that. She wondered how she was even supposed to use the thing, asking whether he was sure there was no bucket or something. She followed after Kifri, but could no longer see him. She admitted that at that moment, touching magic felt creepy to her. Someone else who was there heard her and asked what she was afraid of, saying there was nothing tricky about that spell. She introduced herself as Tatia and asked Coco if she would like her to show her how it worked. She jumped down from the stairs and explained that it was called a vapor bubble, a spell that collected moisture from the air and turned it into usable water. She took it from Coco's hands and demonstrated how to use it, saying that if she tilted the lower tray, the water would come out. Coco caught the water with her hands and was impressed, thanking her for it. Tatia returned the thanks, which left Coco puzzled. Tatia explained that she really liked it when people thanked her, so she gave a thumbs up and thanked her for the thanks. "I see," Coco replied, and thanked her again. Once more, Tatia returned the thanks. Coco grew curious as to whether it would ever end. Another young girl appeared and said Coco should just ignore her. She explained that she should simply let Tatia be when she got excited, and that if she stopped responding to her, she would eventually quiet down. Tatia couldn't believe that Riche said that, explaining she was only helping. Coco thought about the advice to just let her be. She then stopped when she noticed that Riche was carrying a pen and ink and asked whether that was for casting magic. Coco grew curious and wondered whether they were both witches. Tatia replied that they were apprentices, to be precise. They were students of Master Kifri. Hearing that, Tatia asked whether that meant Coco was not his student. She had assumed Coco had come there to study just like them. She inspected Coco carefully and said she looked about their age, then asked which atelier she belonged to. Coco smiled and said that she was not exactly an apprentice yet. What that meant was that she had only just drawn her first spell yesterday, and from that day on, this place would be her new home. The two of them were utterly shocked by that, which left Coco wondering why. Tatia couldn't believe it was her. Coco was confused about what she meant. The two of them exchanged looks, and Tatia explained that it was what people were talking about now. An outsider who had drawn a forbidden spell. The only one allowed to become an apprentice while keeping her memories intact. Just then, Kifri arrived carrying some clothes. Coco was startled by his sudden appearance behind her, and Kifri asked whether she was all right. She turned to look at him. Kifri noticed that Agat was not there, so he asked Tatia and Riche to give him some time alone to speak privately with Coco, and they agreed. Worry was clearly visible in Coco's eyes, so Kifri told her not to worry and said he would explain everything. Long ago, magic had simply been an ordinary part of life. All that was needed was knowledge of the prescribed designs and specially crafted ink. Anyone, from anywhere, could cast it, and magic was familiar to everyone. However, for that very same reason, the world was gradually drowned in war. Because when people have the power to do anything, they will do anything. As a result, many evil forms of magic were created, and the few good souls left in the world turned away from war and gathered together as keepers of magic. They erased all memory of magic from humanity and passed down the knowledge of this art only to apprentices they trusted to safeguard the secret. Since the day of the pact, they spread the belief that only those born with innate power could use magic. If the truth were to spread again, the world would once more sink into chaos. That was why they guarded the secret so carefully, and that was also why her situation had caused so many rumors. Kifri apologized to Coco for that. Coco sat down and said that she did not mind. She admitted that it was her fault. However, there was still one more thing, the matter of forbidden spells. She asked what those were. Kifri replied that they were spells drawn during the time of war, which had been hidden from the world on the day of the pact. They were spells created to harm others. Coco suddenly gathered herself to stand and urged Kifri to show them to her. She said she wanted to see the spells that were not meant to be used. She insisted that she wanted to know all of it. Kifri was taken aback by her reaction. Coco said that she could not move forward without knowing what they are. It was terrifying to bear. Because of that, Kifri sat down and said that normally he would advise her to be patient and wait. But that was not easy in her case. And so, he invited her along, saying that he had something to show her. They climbed the stairs and descended on the other side. Kifri explained that there were so many forbidden spells that they could not even be counted, but that they could be summarized simply. Magic that directly affects the human body or mind must never be performed. This includes things such as transformations, magic that accelerates or slows aging, teleportation that does not use doors or vehicles, magic that controls the minds or emotions of others, or magic that harms or even heals the body. All such magic is forbidden. There is only one exception. Coco realized that it was the magic used to erase memories. That is correct, Kifri replied. Because of this, most magic is used in the creation of magic tools, such as carriages and lamps. He showed her an example there, and Coco could not help but marvel at the lamp. Kifri also showed her a window surrounded by magical seals. When he turned part of it, something strange happened. From there, they could see a tall tower in the distance. Coco also noticed a lake. When they arrived there, however, they saw nothing but hills. Kifri explained that it was a window way. It connected to its analogs, other windows with the same design. He asked whether she could see the structure in the distance. That, he said, was the Tower of Tomes, a vault of knowledge. The moment any book about magic is written, it is immediately duplicated and appears inside that tower. Coco was shocked and realized that the picture book might also be there. She urged him to hurry and take her there, saying she would search for the book and would not sleep until she found it. Kifri tried to calm her down. Just then, a massive sea creature suddenly emerged from the water. Because of that, water splashed through and soaked the two of them. Kifri sealed the window, and Coco clearly had not expected that. They were completely drenched. Kifri insisted that that had been the librarian's trial, and that the Tower of Tomes was protected by 4 librarians. Only witches who have already overcome the trial are permitted to go there. And for Coco to be able to enter the tower, first, she would need to study. Coco had not expected to hear that. Kifri smiled and said that he was glad to hear about her thirst for knowledge. He added that it was only natural to feel afraid. However, he told her to remember that magic which is not forbidden exists solely as a means to bring happiness to people. He rotated the window once more to show her. Flower petals floated around them, something that delighted Coco. If she was going to learn, then why not learn about spells of kindness? Coco was deeply impressed by what she had witnessed. Kifri felt that she agreed, and she answered that she wanted that. Good to hear, he said. Now, he would show her what would be her new room. But because petals were scattered everywhere, he thought they should clean up first. And so, they swept the place before leaving. A short while later, they went up to Coco's new room. Kifri knocked, but it seemed that Agat was still not there. When Coco asked who that was, Kifri replied that she was her roommate. They shared the workspaces, with 2 people assigned to each room. The bedrooms, however, were separate and located down the stairs at the back. Kifri told her not to worry, since the bedroom doors all had locks. As Coco took in her surroundings, Kifri encouraged her to rest for a bit. There were still a few things he needed to take care of, and he told her to just call him if she needed anything. After leaving the room, he reached into his pocket and took out a small object. When he pressed it, it transformed into something like a communication device. He introduced himself as Kifri and told the person on the other end that he greatly appreciated their approval of the child's apprenticeship. As for the book, there was still no progress on that matter. The child was still somewhat disoriented, but things looked promising. They should be pleased by her eagerness toward magic. That was true. It would become an obstacle if she were to hesitate or give in to fear, because the time would come when she would have to face forbidden magic. Back with Coco, as she wandered around the room, she found herself in awe at what a witch's room looked like. Suddenly, someone remarked that that side belonged to her. She was floating in the air and wearing a hat. Coco was amazed at the sight. However, the girl told her to move so she could land. Coco stepped aside and apologized. She knew she might be Agat. Coco introduced herself in turn, but Agat replied that she already knew. She was the outsider everyone was talking about. She understood that Coco was a new apprentice there. As Agat removed her coat, she said it was a shame what had happened to Coco's mother. Coco did not know how to respond to that. Just as she was about to say something, Agat suddenly added that thanks to her, her mother would never become flesh and blood again. Coco was disturbed by what she said. Lowering her head, she replied that she had come there to help her, so that she could learn how to use magic. Agat cut her off, replying that she knew nothing. She said that she had been practicing drawing seals ever since she had learned how to write. She proudly showed the ink stains on her hands. She had passed the examination to become a student of magic and waited to be chosen for an apprenticeship. Yet according to her, an ignorant outsider like Coco did not have what it took. Even so, Coco simply replied that she had already managed to draw one before. At the very least, she had to try. Agat responded that if that was the case, then Coco would have to prove herself. Her test would begin tomorrow. The next morning, Coco found herself staring at something. She was curious about the restroom there. She was amazed when the waste inside the toilet suddenly vanished. There was a knock, and it was Tatia asking whether she was done. Coco came out just then and apologized, saying she had only just finished. A few minutes later, when Coco saw Tatia again, she greeted her with a good morning, and Tatia returned the greeting. Coco asked whether all magical washrooms were like that. She shared that there was a magic spring near her village, but none of the houses there had anything like that. Tatia thought that most contraptions were found in large cities. Coco grew very curious about the contraptions she mentioned and asked her to tell her more about them. However, Tatia apologized and said she was busy, though she did have a book Coco could borrow. Coco simply agreed. When she was left alone, she studied instead. She read the book and learned that tools imbued with magic were called contraptions. Such items were highly valued throughout the world because they could be used even by people who did not practice magic. Only witches could create them, which was why they were so valuable. Creating contraptions was forbidden before passing the examination and becoming a full apprentice. Upon reading that, Coco realized that this must have been what Agat had been referring to. She had mentioned that there was a test before becoming an apprentice. However, there were no details about how it was taken. Just then, Kifri arrived and overheard her question. He asked what details she was talking about. Coco was startled by his sudden arrival. Kifri handed her something and said that there were many aspects of magic that were not recorded in books, and that the best way to learn was not through reading, but through doing. Coco asked what he was holding, and he replied that these were the components and tools used for casting magic. The ink wand was nothing more than a standard dip pen. The nibs used together with conjuring ink needed to be replaced frequently. Conjuring ink itself was an ink made from a special substance called woodcrewer. Only seals drawn with this ink could be activated. There was also a component pestle used to grind ingredients that would be mixed into the conjuring ink in order to perform specific types of magic. Meanwhile, the woodcrewer wand was a baton made from hardened woodcrewer, useful for carving seals into surfaces such as wood or stone, though the marks it left were easy to erase. Lastly, there was the palm quire, a circular notepad that fit in the palm of the hand. It was convenient to use when one needed to form a seal discreetly. Coco was deeply impressed by all of it. Everything looked so beautiful and so neat. When she held the ink wand, she realized that it was the same kind of wand that had been included with the book she had bought back then. It almost felt as though the witch she had met at the festival had intended for her to use the forbidden spells. Coco still felt a bit uneasy about all of this. Even so, she knew that she had to return her mother to how she was before. Kifri asked whether they should begin studying, and she answered yes, please. After half an hour had passed, Coco could be seen lying flat on the floor, as if she were overloaded with information. Kifri asked whether she was all right and whether they should take a break. As she lifted her body, she replied that she was fine. It just felt like she was drowning in the sheer number of new words. As Kifri explained about sigils and about the woodcrewer that came from the silverwood grove of Zoza, none of it was really sinking in for Coco. Kifri apologized and said that he had never given a lesson to a child who had not learned any fundamentals at all. Just then, Agat passed behind them while they were studying. Coco noticed her and followed her with her eyes. Kifri suddenly called her attention back and suggested they try seeing if she could repeat what she had learned so far. Coco agreed and said that spells were composed of 3 elements: the sigil at the center, surrounded by markings called signs, and the outer ring that completed the seal. There was something she had forgotten, and she strained to recall it, wondering what it was. There were different types of sigils, such as those for fire, water, light, and wind, and those determined the type of spell. The signs determined what form the spell would take, as well as its size and direction, such as signs of levitation, signs of dispersion, and signs of columns. And once the outer ring was completed, the seal was set and the magic was activated. After sharing all of that, Coco had completely exhausted herself. She was trembling and nearly collapsed right there. Kifri clapped his hands and praised her, saying she had done well. Things that were merely heard or read were easily forgotten, but things that were understood and spoken aloud remained clearly etched in the mind. Understanding opened the path to mastery, and mastery in turn opened the path to acts like that. Afterward, he used a palm choir to cast a spell, and from it appeared a rose made of water. Coco was utterly amazed by the demonstration. She said she wanted to try it too, and so she immediately went to drawing. Splendid, Kifri said. That was the spirit. However, Coco suddenly stopped, which made Kifri wonder what was wrong. Coco lowered her head and seemed to lose hope as she crumpled her paper. Kifri had not expected that and quickly pulled the paper from her. He told her not to throw it away. Coco struggled and begged him to give it back. She said she could not show what she had drawn after he had just shared such a beautiful flower made of water. What she had drawn was terrible, with wobbly and jumbled lines. Of course it was, Kifri replied. She was still learning, and it seemed they had some more basic issues to address. He pointed out that the ring was not connected. The spell would not activate if the ring was incomplete. Everyone is awkward and unsteady the first time they use a new tool, like a newborn foal stumbling as it learns to stand. In time, she would surely be filled with confidence and be able to move freely as she wished. Kifri guided her hand and told her to connect the ends and see what kind of magic would emerge. At that very moment, water burst forth from the paper, shooting straight toward Agat nearby. The water struck her in the face, leaving her completely soaked. She shot Coco a sharp glare. Coco was utterly shocked by what had happened. She apologized profusely, saying she had not meant to splash her at all. Agat had been busy practicing drawing seals herself, and because the water hit her, her notebook had gotten wet. Coco had not expected that and panicked. She grabbed the notebook and shook it repeatedly to dry it, apologizing over and over and insisting that she would dry it properly. Kifri calmed her down, then apologized to Agat as well and asked whether she was all right. Agat brushed her hair aside and said it was fine, that she was not bothered by it. She then asked for Coco's paper, wondering if she could take a look at it. Kifri agreed and handed it to her. The moment she saw it, she immediately noticed the problem. She pointed out to Coco that one of the signs should have been longer than the others. Because too much pressure had been applied there, the water had burst out to the side. Kifri was impressed and praised her, saying that as always, her understanding was sharp. Her observations were exactly right. He handed her a towel and said that in his opinion, Coco would become very skilled with her hands. Coco was surprised when Kifri suddenly took his witch hat and said his goodbyes. He said he would be gone for 2 to 3 days to visit the Great Hall. He asked Agat to look after Coco while he was away. Coco ran after him and begged him not to go. However, he replied that there was much she could learn from her companions. She should watch them closely and study their techniques. Coco wanted to protest, but there was nothing she could do. She grew nervous at being left alone with Agat and once again apologized about what had happened earlier. Agat told her to stop apologizing, saying she had already said she was not bothered by it. Besides, she thought it was time for Coco to spend her time on more serious study. Her test was about to begin. Coco grew anxious at the thought that she would be undergoing it so soon. The scene then shifted to raging waters. In the middle of that vast ocean stood an extremely tall island. That was where Kifri had gone. He headed straight toward a cone-shaped structure there, one that had a staircase leading downward. However, instead of walking down those stairs, he jumped from the top. As he descended, something suddenly tugged at his clothes. Kifri had not expected that. The one who pulled him remarked that the staircase was beautiful, yet no one ever used it. It had also been a long time since he had last set foot on the seabed, and she addressed him as the young dissident of the Great Hall. Kifri greeted Elira in return. She remarked that many days had passed, and she helped him to his feet. According to the rumors, he had once again done something unusual, and now even had a new apprentice with him. Kifri replied that so she had already heard. Nothing spread faster than gossip. She added that it should remain fleeting, especially when those involved were the ones wearing brimmed caps. Kifri was stunned to hear that. She then said that it was the first time they had seen forbidden magic in 4 years. It was a solid lead, she said, and for that reason, she wished to keep an eye on her as well. Kifri did not respond right away, but that was not the reason he had made his request. Moreover, the apprenticeship had not yet been formally established. The first test was still required. Elira had not expected that. She asked why it had not been done yet. Kifri replied that it was still too early. Besides, it was also the season. Elira agreed. For now, she knew the state of the Dada range. Precisely, Kifri answered. It was at the highest altitude of the year. He could not have her take the test now, because her life would be put in danger. The scene then returned to his atelier, where hesitation could be seen on Coco's face. Agat was adjusting the window way there when Coco asked if she was really sure about this. Master Kifri was not there. That made no difference, Agat replied. Coco would be taking the test alone anyway. Coco insisted that she had only arrived just yesterday, but Agat answered that she herself had passed it when she was only 10 years old. Everyone had to go through it in order to become an apprentice, and the conditions never changed. Coco had no choice but to accept that. The first trial was the consent of the crown. She was told that she was allowed to bring her components and only 3 contraptions. That was all. She had to reach the highest peak of the Dada range without anyone's help and pluck the diadem herb that grew there. The 3 tools she chose had to come from her own home and be within her ability to use. Coco was shocked by that and asked whether she could bring the toilet if she wanted to, the one where you could clearly see the universe. She was told that it used extremely precise magic and could not simply be picked up and carried around. In addition to that, she already had a guidance orb that showed the way to any destination and a vapor bubble for drinking water. That, she thought, was probably all Coco could handle. Coco then asked whether a pair of shoes would be allowed. When Agat asked what shoes she meant, Coco looked down at what she was wearing. Were those not contraptions as well? She had seen the soles glow when she had been flying with Master Kifri. Though embarrassed, Coco took a chance and asked whether, if it was not too much trouble, Agat might lend them to her for a while. Agat could hardly believe the request. Coco apologized repeatedly and said she was right. It was not fair. She should forget she had even asked. Even so, Agat removed the shoes she was wearing and handed them to her. Coco was stunned when she said that she could borrow them. Before Coco could finish thanking her, Agat immediately pushed her toward the window way and told her to hurry and begin the test. Coco fell through to the other side. Agat almost forgot to mention that she only had one chance to take that test. If she failed, she would not be approved as Master Kifri's apprentice, and she would have to leave the atelier. Agat gradually vanished as the window closed, leaving Coco completely alone inside a dense forest. Coco pulled up her hood and admitted that she felt less confident now. But she had to try. There was no turning back anymore. She used the guidance orb to find out which direction she needed to go and followed it. She only had to climb up, so it was no big deal. She gave herself a pep talk, saying she could do it. If a 10-year-old could manage it, then surely it would be easy for her too. However, once she climbed up there, she could not believe what her eyes were seeing. Countless enormous orbs were floating all around the area. Coco grew curious and wondered whether this really was the Dada range. To become an apprentice, she had to pluck the diadem herb that grew at the summit of the Dada range. And according to the guidance orb, it was pointing upward. So that really was it. She had not even realized that it was floating in midair. She suddenly remembered that she did have contraptions with her. She recalled the shoes and took them out. She was delighted as she put on the shoes she had borrowed from Agat. She noticed that half of the seal was on the left shoe, while the other half was on the right. So all she needed to do was bring them together. She pressed the shoes together and was startled by what happened. She suddenly began floating in the air. Joy flooded through her. She could not believe that she was finally floating. However, she lost her balance while airborne and eventually tipped to the side. She said that Master Kifri had been right. She was just like a newborn foal. But if she could manage to fly, then reaching the peak would be easy for her. And so, she did not lose hope and told herself that it was time to figure out what to do. Slowly and carefully, she repeated the motion of bringing her shoes together to activate the spell. She remembered what Kifri had said, that before long she would be filled with confidence. Coco kept convincing herself over and over to think only positive thoughts. And at last, it worked again and she rose up. Before long, She was floating near the hovering orbs around her. She felt that her balance was improving. Now, it was time to try going even higher. However, she struggled again and fell once more. Fortunately, she managed to grab onto a root beneath a nearby orb. While clinging there, something appeared before her. It was a strange creature with tiny hands and eyes. It was clinging to the same root she was holding onto, but it suddenly fell onto her face. Because of that, she lost her grip and fell into the water below. Coco had not expected that. She recognized the creature as a brush buddy. She had never seen one before. It seemed to be drawn to the magic she was using. Brush buddies were small, furry creatures that resembled the soft bristles of a writing brush. They were attracted to the scent of conjuring ink and often gathered in places where it was used. Coco grew worried when she saw that her shoes were now covered in mud. The brush buddy fell into the water when she took off the shoes she was wearing. Coco was shocked to notice that the seal on the soles had been erased. Panic set in, and she was on the verge of tears. Was it because she had wiped the shoes that the seal was gone? She knew she had to do something about it, so she decided she would just trace it again. But when she opened her bag, the ink she had brought had already spilled out. Coco was nearly crushed by despair because she knew the situation was truly bad now. The ink she had was leaking, and there was no other way to fix it. She could not believe what was happening. Meanwhile, the brush buddy clung to Coco's guidance orb in the water. Coco wondered what she was supposed to do now, especially since evening had already fallen. Was everything already over for her? The scene shifted back to the ocean, where the extremely tall island that served as the entrance to the Great Hall stood. Its main structure was located beneath the water. From the outside, various kinds of sea creatures could be seen swimming around it. Kifri headed straight to what looked like a shop selling witch hats and various other equipment. He submitted an application form there and thanked the staff member who assisted him. The staff replied that it would only take a moment and that he would have it shortly. Elira followed after him and remarked that if he lived there in the hall, he would not need to travel just to get things like that. There were plenty of rooms for all of his apprentices. That place was the center of their world, and there he would have access to everything a witch could possibly need. Kifri replied that he would simply go there whenever he needed something. A short while later, what Kifri had requested was handed to him. The staff apologized for the wait, and he replied that it was no problem. Elira commented on his deep-seated dislike of the Great Hall. But if he insisted on living in that remote atelier, then at the very least, he should keep a close eye on his apprentices. For little mice at that age, she said, there was no telling what might happen when the cat was away. Back at the atelier, Tatia wondered why Coco was missing. She asked Agat whether she had seen her. It was already time for dinner, yet Coco was not responding when she knocked on her bedroom door. Tatia wondered if she might be asleep. Meanwhile, Agat was busy feeding wood into the furnace and replied that Tatia would not find Coco there. She was in the Dada range, taking the test. Tatia was completely shocked. She could not believe that Coco was there alone. She asked if she was serious. Coco had only just arrived there. She wondered why had Agat not stopped her. Agat replied that the test should have been taken before moving there in the first place. Tatia said that while that might be true, still, as the wood burned in the furnace, Agat looked at her and said that if Coco could not pass such a simple test, then she was not suited to be an apprentice. She would not tolerate anyone who could not keep up with her. There was nothing to gain from spending time on someone beneath her, especially if that person was an outsider. Tatia could hardly believe what she was hearing. Agat added that Tatia should stop worrying. Coco would be back soon enough, without even attempting the test. The mountains were filled with moisture. This was their highest level of the entire year. Even Sylph's shoes could not reach the summit. She was completely unaware of it, with no sense of danger and no understanding of how things worked. Agat crushed the wood at the furnace and said that Coco should not be part of their world. Tatia went straight to the dining table and sat there with her head lowered. When Riche asked whether she was not going to eat, she replied that she would. Even so, she said there was a big lump in her stomach. Meanwhile, Riche went to get a second serving. Tatia grew irritated and asked whether she was the only one who was worried about Coco. She couldn't believe how they could all act like they did not care. Back at the Dada range, Coco spotted a small boat. She climbed aboard, and while she was out in the middle of the water, she continued trying to reach the nearest orb. No matter how much she stretched out her arms, she still could not climb up. She slumped down saying that she had tried fixing the shoes using what little ink she had left, but it no longer activated. She pressed the shoes together again and again, but nothing happened. They were already too soaked, and the ink had spread everywhere. She then thought about what would happen if she drew directly on her own feet. She swallowed hard when she realized that was not allowed. Drawing magic directly on the body was forbidden. She did not even know what kind of spell she could possibly use in that situation. She lay there alone. The brush buddy suddenly emerged from her bag and stared at her. Coco fell silent and said that Agat had been right all along. Just because anyone could draw magic did not mean it was easy to draw it properly. She thought that ordinary people truly lacked the ability to do it. All of her companions had been drawing magic since they were children. Of course, she could not keep up with them. Then she suddenly remembered Kifri's comment from before, that he had had no idea there was an artisan in that village, and that it could be considered real magic. Coco stood up and realized that was right. She did have her own magic after all, and so she picked up some small stones. First, she needed to find a small stone, as flat as possible, with a slightly pointed end. After that, she took the ink-soaked pouch, tore off a piece of sufficient size, and wrapped it around the stone. Finally, she simply moistened the tip. As a result, she created a pigment stone, a stone used by tailors to mark designs on fabric. She then removed her cloak and noticed that it had dried stiff from all the mud, and it would work perfectly. She tied it, knotted it, and secured it to the end of the boat. She spread the cloak out and began to draw, just like she used to do back at their shop. She remembered what Kifri had said before, that everyone was unsteady when using a new tool for the first time. And if that was the case, then Coco decided she would switch to a tool she was completely familiar with. That way, her fingers could move freely and dance as she wished. She did not even notice the passage of time. Morning came while she was still absorbed in drawing there, with the brush buddy quietly at her side. The next day, after finishing the drawings on the fabric, Coco stood up and turned her cloak into a sail. She added a sigil of wind and a sign of levitation. After tying it securely, she greeted the little brush buddy with a good morning, saying that it was not shy at all. Coco stared at her work and said that she knew it was not a typical design. Normally, a sigil would be placed at the center and surrounded by signs. However, she had learned that uneven signs pushed magic in a single direction. Because of that, she decided to use only one sign and make it extremely long. She felt proud of what she had drawn, even though she had no idea whether it would work. From the ground, the brush buddy crawled up onto her shoulder, which startled Coco. She asked whether it wanted to come along. When it responded, she agreed, as long as it made sure to hold on very tightly. After that, she connected the outer ring, causing her cloak to suddenly float up into the air, along with the entire boat they were on. However, the sail could not bear the weight of the boat and came loose. Instead of being afraid, Coco gazed up at the sky in awe. They passed through countless floating orbs. Coco teared up with joy, realizing that she had done it, and that she was flying using her own magic. She continued ascending, pulling on the cloak to adjust the direction of their flight. She turned left and, looking down below, said that this was a dream come true. A true, living cloak of flight. Tears streamed down her face once again. In the end, it was everything she had learned while helping her mother that showed her the way to use magic. And so, she said that her mother should just wait for her, because she would come back. As she continued to rise higher and higher, she promised that she would fix the mistake she had made. When she finally reached the very summit of the Dada range, Coco stretched out her right hand to grasp her target, the diadem herb that grew only there. At that exact moment, Kifri arrived back at the Atelier through the windowway. He greeted Tatia and said that he had returned. Tatia immediately ran up to him to tell him what had happened. Upon hearing it, Kifri dropped what he was carrying and asked if Coco had gone there alone to take the test. Tatia lowered her head in response. Kifri grew extremely worried, saying that it was far too risky. They needed to stop her. However, Tatia said that if they interfered, she would fail. Agat overheard their exchange. Kifri insisted that Coco should not have been there at all. It was far too early. She was not like them. Coco had only just entered their world. He turned the knob on the windowway, thinking that if anything happened to Coco, they would lose more than just the girl. He gripped it tightly and adjusted the correct setting. Just then, they saw Coco walking there. They were shocked at the sight of her. Tatia felt relieved and said that she was all right. She hugged her and said that they had been worried about her. Coco immediately called out to Agat and said that she had obtained the consent of the crown, showing her what she was holding. Agat did not respond right away. Coco handed it to her as proof. She wondered if that meant she had done it. However, Agat was not pleased. She simply turned her back on Coco and walked away. Coco had not expected that reaction at all. Just then, Kifri called out to her, and Coco turned to face him. Using magic without proper understanding and careful preparation, he said, was an extremely reckless and dangerous act. Of all people, she should have known that best. Coco could only lower her head as he told her that a single misstep could have cost her life, and that she must never repeat such behavior again. Coco had no choice but to apologize to her master Kifri. He then added that, truthfully, she no longer needed to put herself in danger just to prove her worth. She was already his apprentice. After that, he handed her the item he had obtained from the Great Hall, and when Coco opened it, she could hardly believe what was inside. It was the mark of a witch, a symbol of pride, and at the same time, a solemn vow that she would never use magic for vile purposes. He told her that she should always feel its weight as a reminder of the responsibility she now bore. For that pointed hat would watch over her and her magic. Coco put it on with great pride, and Kifri asked her to take good care of it. She replied that she would. Suddenly, her stomach growled with hunger just as Kifri asked whether they should head up now. It seemed they needed to feed her as well. The scene then returned to the Dada range, showing someone standing atop a floating orb, staring toward the window way. It was the masked witch who had sold the book to Coco when she was younger. The brimmed cap said that the seed had finally sprouted. Among the countless sigils that exist, witches recognize 4 as the primary tetrad. The Sigil of Might, which has the ability to manipulate and move the land itself, crushing massive rocks into gravel or binding sand together into solid stone, classically known as the Sigil of Earth. The Sigil of Water, which grants the power to command the very substance that carries and nourishes all life. The Sigil of Fire, a ferocious force that humanity has long used as both blade and shield. And the Sigil of Levitation, a great marvel of travel that allows one to reach countless places impossible to access on foot, traditionally known as the Sigil of Wind. Of these 4, the Sigil of Fire grants power over something non-material. Without proper balance and control over scale, its flames can easily grow beyond restraint and spiral out of control. Because of this, the sigil must be handled with far greater caution. While Coco was studying, a fire suddenly broke out. Someone splashed water onto her when the paper ignited, and that someone was Tatia, who asked whether she was all right. Coco thanked her for it. In response, Tatia returned the thanks as well. She then asked what Coco was doing. Coco answered that she was drawing fire magic. On its own, fire magic would consume the paper and even the seal itself, yet the flames suspended in the air would continue to burn. That was the perfect exercise for training levitation magic. That was what Master Kifri had said, but she still could not properly balance the fire. Sparks kept falling onto the paper, burning everything. Tatia used her boots to float into the air and asked why Coco was so fixated on levitation magic. Standing upside down in midair, she said that she had overcome the Dada range and flown across many parts of the sky. Coco replied that when she had been there, she had damaged Agat's sylph shoes. She wanted to fix them first before returning them. Tatia looked at it in surprise and was impressed. She wondered if she really was the one who did that. They looked brand new. Coco answered that they repaired Traveler's shoes back at her home, and that the only thing missing had been drawing the seal. Even so, her lines always ended up thin and wavy. Kifri suddenly appeared behind her and said that perhaps they needed to find her a new wand. It was important to have a pen whose weight and grip suited her. The one she was using now was just one of his old wands. Perhaps she should try out different wands and choose one that fit her. Because of that, he decided that they would go to the stationers. The magic stationers. Coco was stunned and grew excited upon learning that there was a shop like that. She said the name stationers sounded so wonderful. She blushed deeply and asked for a moment, savoring the words. Kifri had not expected that reaction. A short while later, Kifri set off together with his apprentices. He carried Agat and Coco, while Tatia and Riche flew on their own. Their destination was the town of Kaun, a township of the Marshwoods. When they arrived, it was immediately noticeable that there were so many witches there. That was right, Kifri said. Caln was the largest settlement of witches in their area. The witches built that shoal in the middle of the river to support a massive watchtower meant to defend the town against the moleworms that lived in the marshwoods on the opposite bank. Witches gathered there in great numbers, and before long, the area became filled with ateliers. They did not even bother building a bridge anymore. No one needed one. While Kifri was in full classroom mode explaining all this, Tatia pointed out that it seemed Coco had already left the lesson. She had walked ahead, wandering around and saying that it felt like she was in a dream. Everywhere she looked, all she could see were witches. She pointed at something and asked her master what it was. Just as he was about to answer, someone cut in and apologized, saying she would rather not spend her time acting as Coco's tour guide. It was Agat, who said there were shops she wanted to visit, so she would head off first. They could meet up at the stationer's before it was time to head back, if that was all right. Kifri agreed, and Agat took her leave. Coco fell silent at the side because of that. Kifri then asked her whether the two of them were getting along. Coco could not answer right away. The truth was, she wanted them to be friends, if possible. She recalled the moment she had glimpsed Agat drawing and had been amazed by how precise her lines were, as well as how lovely her seals looked. She was sure that someone who drew magic like that had to be a lovely person as well. Riche spoke up from behind her, saying that personality and skill were not related, and that it would be better not to expect too much. She added that the best witches were usually the weirdest ones. Coco grew curious and asked whether that was normal, and Kifri replied that he was not sure if that was really the case. As they walked on, a shadowy figure suddenly appeared in an alley. Coco turned and stopped. When the others asked what was wrong, she replied that it was nothing, thinking it must have just been her imagination. She followed after them again, and Kifri called out to her, telling her it was up ahead. When she caught up, Kifri gestured and welcomed her to Starry Sword, stationer extraordinaire. Coco was deeply impressed at the sight. An enchanting magic supply shop unfolded before her eyes. She noticed that there was an enormous tree standing right inside the shop itself. Someone came down the stairs and looked in surprise at the apprentice who was standing there in awe of the silverwood. He asked whether she had never seen it before. Silverwood, he said, was the most basic of things. Kifri replied that Coco had only just become his apprentice. He called out to the old man, Mr. Nalnoa. The man bent down to observe Coco closely. Is that so? He said. Then she must be the young girl he had been hearing about. He suddenly laughed when he realized that. Her reaction was perfectly normal, he added, and apologized to her. She had not recognized his tree, and he had not recognized her, so now they were even. Tatia then introduced him properly, saying that he was Mr. Nalnoa, the owner of the Starry Sword. That was right, he said. Every component they could see there had been made by him and his grandchild, Tarda. All kinds of wands and ink, even custom extractions at whatever concentration was required. Coco had no idea what some of those terms meant, like extractions. Seeing her confusion, Mr. Nalnoa remarked to Kifri that it seemed he was always absent from the classroom. Just because he had a fine head of hair and scholarly good looks did not mean he could use that as an excuse. A teacher, he said, ought to teach. Coco grew curious at the mention of scholarly good looks. Kifri could only scratch his head, saying again that she had only just started. Mr. Nalnoa then spoke to Coco and said he would give her a demonstration. She just had to follow him. Coco grew excited and agreed. As they went up the stairs, Coco noticed a young boy absorbed in his work. He was laser-focused on the wand he was making, and she was impressed by him. Mr. Nalnoa asked whether she was coming, and she answered yes, so she hurried after him. At the top, Mr. Nalnoa examined some leaves on the tree. Coco was lucky, he said, because the darkening of that branch had progressed nicely. He cut it and placed it into a test tube with a flame beneath. They should watch closely, he told them. Slowly, ink began to seep out. Kifri's apprentices gasped as the water suddenly darkened. Kifri pointed it out, saying that was woodcrewer, and Coco could hardly believe it. When healthy silver-white branches withered, they turned black like charcoal. Left that way, Mr. Nalnoa explained, they became poisonous, to the tree and to people as well. Boil the roots in water, siphon off the excess, and presto, the very root of magic itself, raw ink, ready to be refined. Kifri explained that ordinary ink is made by burning wood and collecting the soot left behind by the smoke. But conjuring ink is different. As the name woodcrewer implies, they harvest the blood of the silverwood. Because of that, the tree is of special importance to witches. Mr. Nalnoa agreed. They could not obtain ink from any other tree, strange as it might seem. There was an old legend that once, a silverwood fell in love with a witch and willingly offered its branches as wands and its crewer as ink. Hearing that, Coco suddenly remembered the wand. Mr. Nalnoa asked if that was why she had come there, to look for a wand. Coco answered that it was. Mr. Nalnoa poured a small amount of ink into a small container and said she would need it when using the wands. He was certain that there was one there that would be perfect for her. Kifri then suddenly asked whether he could place an order for paper as well. While the two of them were talking, the apprentices headed downstairs ahead of them. Tatia even excused herself and invited Coco to come along. When Tatia asked what kind of wand Coco wanted to get, Coco said she wanted one like hers, since it was very light. As they went down the stairs, Coco glanced toward the window, and anxiety was clearly written on her face when she saw the witch who had sold her the book with forbidden spells. She had not expected that at all. She hurriedly ran off to chase after the witch. Tatia noticed Coco running and grew puzzled. Meanwhile, Agat could be seen shopping for soles for her sylph shoes, looking for something that fit her size and, if possible, was not made of wood. Coco suddenly passed behind her, and Agat was surprised by it, growing curious about what was going on. Tatia followed after and asked whether she had seen Coco run by. When Agat asked if something had happened, Tatia said she had no idea. Coco had suddenly started running in a hurry. They grabbed Agat and said they needed to catch up to her. Agat was startled that they were dragging her along too and asked why she had to come with them. They caught up to Coco as she ran into a narrow alley, and Agat followed after her to stop her. Even so, Coco kept running. Agat called out for her to stop, but it was as if Coco could not hear her. Suddenly, smoke enveloped the surroundings, and they vanished from that alley as if it had all been a bubble. Moments later, Agat finally grabbed Coco by the arm to stop her. She demanded to know what Coco was doing and where she thought she was going. Coco explained that the witch had been there, right in front of the shop. The witch who had sold her the forbidden spell. However, they all froze when the figure Coco had been chasing disappeared. Coco muttered that she had been too slow. Agat grew irritated, saying that Coco was causing a scene again. Tatia tried to cheer them up, saying that at least they were all together. For now, she suggested that they return to the shop. Riche then called their attention, having noticed something strange about the place. The place seemed really different, even though it was just one alley away from the main road. Coco felt puzzled. Agat added that they should look around. The architecture there was completely different. Tatia grew nervous and asked where they were now, and which way they had come from. Coco admitted that she had been so focused on running that she thought she had lost track of everything. Still, they might not be very far away. Agat sat down and examined the ground. There were no roads or walls in Kaln made of white stone like that. All of them began to wonder whether they were no longer in Kaln at all. Tatia said that was silly. They had not even gone through a window way, and it was not like they had teleported. They must have simply gotten lost. Tatia then took to the air to look at the area from above, but Coco stopped her. Even so, Agat said she had a point. Coco asked whether she meant the part about them being lost. Agat replied that was not it. It was possible that they had been directly teleported without realizing it. Coco grew uneasy because she thought that was not allowed. Master Kifri had mentioned that spells like that were forbidden. Tatia suddenly let out a piercing scream, making them all look up. As she descended, they asked what was wrong. She answered that it was bad news. Very bad news. They were definitely no longer in Kaln. They needed to leave immediately and run. She took off first, with the other three following after her. They shouted for her to slow down and asked whether she had seen something. She replied that she had not just seen it, it had seen her. Coco asked what she meant, and when she turned around, an enormous creature came into view. A dragon, which her companions also saw. Back at the Starry Sword, Kifri called out to Mr. Nalnoa and asked whether he had happened to notice his apprentices. He could not find them anywhere. Mr. Nalnoa replied that perhaps they had gotten bored and slipped away. Kifri insisted that was impossible. That shop was the most fascinating place in the world for them. They could easily spend an entire day there alone. Mr. Nalnoa called him a silver-tongued scamp for that. Kifri grew thoughtful, saying that they were not the type to leave without even thanking him. Where could they have gone? Just then, the young boy came upstairs and said that he had seen them. He said they were chasing after a witch wearing strange garb. That witch had a mask shaped like an eyeball. Kifri grew uneasy upon hearing that. The scene shifted to the witch in question, who said that he had no business with the three of them, but that he supposed they would just have to cope. Nonetheless, she welcomed Coco to the world of magic. Behind his eyeball mask, a smile could be seen. He said that Coco alone was their one and only hope. The dragon slowly descended toward the apprentices, who stood frozen and unable to move. They could not believe that a dragon was standing right in front of them. Coco could not process it and asked the others if it was really true. Tatia said that this was bad news. From behind them, Agat whispered that they should keep looking straight ahead and not avert their eyes. They needed to back away slowly. She would give the signal once they reached the corner, and then they could run. Following her instructions, they carefully stepped backward, one slow step at a time, while the dragon simply watched them. Coco had no idea what to do, since this was the first time she had ever been in a situation like this. At Agat's signal, they all bolted the moment they passed the corner. The dragon immediately rushed after them in pursuit. Agat pulled out her wand and palm choir, realizing she needed to use the sigil of fire along with spiraling wind signs. When she aimed it at the dragon, swirling flames burst forth and rushed toward it. Coco was awestruck by what she saw. Agat said this was their chance and told them to run. As they hurried away, Coco praised Agat, saying that spell had been amazing. She asked if Agat had drawn it on the spot. Agat replied that of course she had not. It was already prepared in her choir, one of the spells she always carried with her, ready in case it was needed. She only had to close the ring to cast it. Coco was deeply impressed and said it was so neat. She asked if Agat could teach her how to draw something like that later. Agat could not believe she was asking that and demanded whether Coco realized how dangerous their situation was right now. Tatia suddenly called out, warning that it was bad because they had run into a dead end. Agat said they needed to find another way. Tatia was alarmed when she heard that and pointed out that they could not go back, as the dragon would chase them down and eat them. She panicked, saying she could not die yet. She had not even cast a single spell worth remembering. She wondered why she had even gotten dragged into this. When Coco heard that, she froze. Tatia noticed and was shocked as well. Coco was left speechless, while Tatia felt ashamed of the words she had let slip. Agat tried to calm her down, saying they were apprentices and they had magic. They would surely find a way to escape. She dropped to one knee and said she would drill through using a wall breaker seal. She ordered Tatia and Riche to buy her a little time. They agreed. Meanwhile, Coco just stood there, unable to move. She could see it in Tatia's eyes that she thought this was Coco's fault. And Coco felt she was right. She was the reason they had ended up in this mess. Because of that, she had to think of a way to get them out. Tatia drew a spell on the ground, a sigil of levitation with dancing puppet signs. Though trembling, she concentrated hard to complete it. She took off her coat to use it. With the spell, she set up a flying puppet as a diversion, causing her cloak to float into the air. The dragon noticed it and was distracted for the moment. Tatia thought that would be enough to keep the dragon busy. Agat praised her, saying nice work, and told them not to waste the opportunity. While the three of them were occupied, Coco observed the dragon. Her attention was drawn to a large pillar behind it. It looked like she had realized something. Still staring, she stepped closer to the busy Agat to tell her to look at it. Because Agat was focused on drawing a sign, Coco's touch caused the line she was drawing to slip. Coco had not meant to do that and immediately apologized. Agat shot her an angry glare. She was furious that Coco had ruined her spell and demanded to know what she was thinking. Touching a witch while drawing was absolutely forbidden. Coco kept apologizing, saying she did not mean to. Agat replied sarcastically that of course she did not mean to, just like how she had not meant to drag them all into this mess, or how she had not meant to turn her own mother into stone. Coco froze at those words. Agat went on to say that all of this was Coco's fault. If only she understood just how ignorant and unknowledgeable she really was, then maybe she could help everyone by stopping her attempts altogether. Coco fell silent after hearing that. Tatia asked what they were going to do now. Agat answered that they had no time to draw another spell. They needed to double back and try another way. Riche cut in and said it was already taken care of. She had drawn a small spell on the wall, and as a result, a large section of it burst apart and exploded. Smoke filled the area, and when it cleared, a hole had been blasted through the wall. She said it was done and there was no need to draw anything else. Agat felt relieved by what she had done and praised her with a well done. She told them to hurry and get away from her. Tatia was confused by what she said, prompting Agat to rephrase it and tell them to get away from there instead. That was what she meant. However they wanted to take it, she said it was fine with her. She called for Tatia to follow, and Tatia crawled through the hole. Coco went last. As she was about to enter, she picked up the witch hat that had been left behind and paused. She hugged it tightly, thinking of Master Kifri and wondering what she should do. The scene shifted back to Kalm, where Kifri stood atop a tall tower, scanning the surroundings. Mr. Nalnoa called out to him, asking whether he had seen any sign of the children. Kifri came down and said that he had not. It seemed they were not anywhere outside. He said he had never imagined that those with brimmed caps would actively seek her out. Tarda was surprised when he heard that, since he had an idea of who the brimmed caps referred to. That was right, Kifri replied. They were exactly who he thought they were. Witches from a bygone era who wore hats and masks to conceal their faces and who practiced forbidden magic. He thought that Coco's presence might have drawn some kind of hint, but he had never expected them to pursue her. He told Tarda that the witch he had seen might be connected to the witch Coco had spoken to when she was younger. He asked whether Tarda remembered anything at all. Tarda apologized and said he was sorry because everything had happened too fast. I see, Kifri replied. Just then, he was startled when something tugged at his cloak. It was the brush buddy. He recognized it and remembered that it was the brush buddy Coco had brought along. He asked it whether it was with the girls and if it knew where they had gone. It seemed to understand him and responded. When he asked it to show him the way to them, it moved ahead to lead him there. As they ran, Kifri grew uneasy as he realized that the sun was close to setting. He prayed that everyone would be safe. The apprentices came to a halt when they realized they had once again ended up back at the hole Riche had made. Agat asked the others how many times they had already gone through that place, because they were just going around in circles. Tatia thought it looked like the entire area was under the influence of a spell. It was a magic maze. They suddenly heard the dragons growl. Terror washed over them, especially with night approaching. They needed to find shelter, somewhere to hide. Agat was trembling and said that it was getting cold as well. Tatia sat down at the side and covered her ears. Someone approached her and called her name. It was Coco, saying that Tatia had dropped her hat. Tatia thanked her for returning it and suddenly held it tightly. Coco asked if she was all right, but then answered her own question, saying that of course she was not. She apologized and took responsibility, saying that everything that had happened was her fault. Tatia must have been shaking because she no longer had her cloak. Because of that, Coco offered her own and took it off. She told her to use it, and that Coco would stay close beside her to keep her warm. Tatia was curious about what Coco was doing. Coco explained that when she first wore it, she had been surprised by how safe it made her feel. Even though her body had been trembling underneath it, and she had been gripping her sides tightly out of fear, none of that showed. To the outside world, she had looked like a confident witch. So now, she wanted Tatia to wear her cloak. If they were going to get out of there, they would need her and her magic more than they would need a clueless, useless Coco. Tatia grew troubled by what she said. Suddenly, clouds filled the space around them, something that surprised Coco. The two of them were enveloped by it, and Agat grew curious about what was happening. Coco had not expected that warm feeling and asked if they were inside a cloud. Tatia suddenly apologized to her. She said she was sorry for the way she had looked at Coco earlier. She should not have blamed her. Coco replied that it was all right and that she had been right. But Tatia could not accept that. Whether she had said it out loud or not, she had felt it and shown it. She had been afraid and taken it out on Coco. She might have been a uniformed witch, but she said she was unfit. Coco was the new girl, so she should have been the one watching out for her. She took Coco's hand and she called her by name, insisting that she was already taking care of her. She made her feel warm and fuzzy through that spell. They should have been trembling in fear for their lives, yet she felt completely calm. At the very moment she thought magic could not possibly be any more amazing it was. She was overjoyed by the cloud she had created. Tatia could only scratch her head, not expecting that Coco would like it so much. She said it was her own creation. When she was younger, she had dreamed of napping on a cloud in the sky. She had been experimenting with drawing spells to achieve that for a long time, but she still had not perfected it. Once she did, she planned to submit it for official consideration as a general use spell, something all witches could use. She knew the magic she worked on was not very practical, but that dream still mattered deeply to her. That was why she thought she should wear the cloak meant for her. It was hers to protect until the day came when they would all wear new cloaks. The day they would return home as full-fledged witches. The two apprentices agreed. Agat suddenly appeared and said that if they wanted to ride the cloud, she would need to give it more substance. Riche, who had followed, added that it was freezing outside, so they should just let them get inside. Meanwhile, Agat said that if she wanted to fly using it, she would need to use some kind of substitute material, like cotton. Tatia replied that it was just a regular quilt. The way it sank was the best part. Agat said it was fun to talk about dreams, but it was time to return to reality. How were they supposed to get out of there? From all the circling around, they knew there was some kind of spell affecting the entire area. It looked like it was meant to trap the dragon. Either way, forbidden or not, if it was magic, then there had to be a seal. Coco suddenly remembered something and raised her hand. Because of that, all of them looked at her. She said she thought she knew where the seal was. The apprentices then moved to get a look at the dragon. They hid at a corner and slowly peeked out. After observing it, Agat said Coco was right. There was something at the pillar behind the dragon. It could very well be the seal. Coco also noticed that the dragon always stayed in one spot, making her wonder if it was guarding the seal. Tatia grew uneasy at the thought that the seal might also be there to bring people like them in, just to feed it. Gripping her wand, Agat said she would not let herself become its dinner. She would show it some real fire. As she charged forward, Coco stopped her, which startled her. Coco explained that it did not look like the dragon had been hurt by the spell Agat used earlier. It might have backed off because of the fire, but she did not think it would be easy to take it down with fire magic. Agat asked in return if she had a suggestion. Coco answered that they would not take it down at all. Her companions were stunned by her suggestion. Agat asked what she was even talking about, and whether that was because of what she had said earlier. Coco immediately denied it and said it was not. She said she was actually very thankful. What they had said had simply given her an idea. She had a plan, though she was not entirely sure how it would play out, but she wanted to try it. When Agat asked what they would do if it failed, Coco answered that it very well might. Still, she smiled as she said that her plan would not put them in danger. So even if it failed, they could just think of something else. Agat had not expected that response. Coco was moving forward even while believing it might fail. Tatia grew excited and asked what the plan was. Coco then explained it. Agat remained silent off to the side. After hearing the plan, Tatia said she thought it would work. They stacked their hands together and said that they would all go home together. Meanwhile, the skeptic Agat did not join in and stayed at the side. When the dragon growled again, Coco let out a shout, prompting Agat to tell her to be quiet. The four of them prepared to carry out the plan Coco had come up with. Moments later, Agat asked whether everyone was ready. They all replied yes, telling her to just give the signal. When she said, "Let's do this," all four of them ran at once. While the dragon rested, Coco peeked out toward it. Tatia peeked as well. She lifted her hat and waved it back and forth, which turned out to be a signal for Riche on the opposite side. She told Agat that it looked like they were ready too. On the ground, Agat had already drawn a spell. When she learned that everyone was in position, she said it was time to complete the ring. Riche agreed and told her to go ahead. Using her wand, Agat closed the ring, causing the spell to activate. In an instant, clouds enveloped the area, drawing the dragon's attention. Tatia and Coco ran toward Agat's position now that the plan had begun. For the moment, they would just wait. As she observed, Agat wondered whether this would really work. The scene shifted back a few clock marks earlier to when they had been discussing the plan. When Agat confirmed what Coco wanted to do, Coco smiled and said she was right. At last, they would be able to realize Tatia's dream. That place was freezing and miserable, while Tatia's clouds were warm and incredibly comfortable. Coco thought that if they made an enormous cloud bed for the dragon, it would be so happy that it would not want to leave at all. That way, they could walk straight through without being chased. Riche thought the idea was brilliant. Even the greatest witch could do nothing when trapped in the embrace of a soft bed. Everyone agreed except Agat. She said she could not believe it. Did they really think a spell like that would work? Tetia grew teary-eyed at that and called her mean. This was her dream they were talking about. Agat replied that she was not mocking her dream. She just thought there was a time and place for every spell. Still, it would not hurt to try, would it? Coco asked. Wasn't the purpose of magic to bring happiness to everyone? If it worked, they would solve their problem without anyone getting hurt, themselves or the dragon. Tetia added that if Agat helped, the spell would definitely turn out more polished. Exactly, Coco said. Hadn't Agat mentioned earlier something about adding more substance to the cloud? Agat crossed her arms and said yes, she had a few ideas. Tetia stepped closer and told her that in that case, she should help them. Among the four of them, she was the best at drawing. Because of that, Agat had no choice but to agree. Coco and the others were overjoyed that they had convinced her. Still, Agat insisted that they had to do this properly. First, they needed to clearly define their goal. She asked Tetia whether what she wanted was a cloud you could lie on. Tetia nodded and said something like a nice, fluffy bed. Something soft like a cloud, but with more substance to the touch so you would not fall through. They needed a kind of material that was easy to shape and easy to find around them, sturdy enough to support a dragon, yet still soft. The four of them brainstormed, thinking about whether bread, straw, snow, animal fur, brush buddies, leaves, cotton, bird feathers, dirt, bubbles, cloth, water, or shredded paper might work. Then Agat asked why them to considering sand. If they reused the earlier spell, they could crush parts of the walls and floor down into fine sand. Tetia agreed, saying it would be nice, smooth sand that would be soft and comfortable. They praised Agat for the idea. She added that if they increased the number of signs in the wall breaker spell, the particles would become finer, and if the seals were smaller, the results would be even smoother. If they needed tiny seals, Riche could easily handle that. Riche raised her hand, readied her wand, and began drawing without hesitation. Coco was impressed by how fast she worked. Tetia proudly remarked that tiny seals were Riche's specialty. Agat asked Tetia to think of a way to move the sand into the center of the area without packing it too tightly. Agat herself would create a spell to bind everything together just enough so it would not fall apart. Tetia saluted and said she would take care of it. When Coco asked what she should do, Agat simply told her to hang back. They would try out her plan, but Coco did not yet have enough training to draw any of the spells they needed right now. All she had to do was sit tight and not get in their way. Coco agreed, but asked if she could at least watch from behind while they worked. She promised to be careful. Agat allowed it, as long as she did not interfere. Coco swore that she would not. She dropped to her knees in delight, thanking her over and over. Agat could hardly believe her reaction. The three of them each set about their own tasks. As they drew, Coco could not help but feel awed. There was not even a trace of hesitation in her companions. It was as if they could already see the lines before drawing them, as though the design was already there, hidden only by some magic that made the paper appear blank to her eyes alone. Their strokes were smooth and confident. Coco admitted to herself that only now was she truly seeing the depth of their abilities. Even so, Agat grew irritated and dissatisfied. She crumpled the paper and said it was not good enough, then threw it aside. Coco noticed and picked up the discarded work. When she unfolded it, she thought the circle looked perfect. She wondered how Agat could do that, and thought that maybe she should take a closer look. So while Agat was busy drawing on her palm quire, Coco stayed behind and simply watched. She noticed that Agat traced the motion in the air several times before actually starting, drawing outward from the point closest to herself. Coco glanced over at Tetia and Riche and wondered if they were doing the same. That made her think about herself. She realized that she had never even considered where to begin a ring or how to properly finish it. She knew she needed more practice. So she took out her own wand and tried to imitate what she had seen. She experimented with different ways of drawing a spell. Meanwhile, it was obvious that Agat was under a lot of stress. She could not use signs of convergence. That packs it too much. And they did not have enough fabric to wrap things that way either, as Riche pointed out. But if they tried to bind it with air instead, Tetia said it would not last. The whole thing would fall apart. Every idea they came up with always seemed to be missing something. Tetia complained that she could not think of anything else anymore, wondering why she had not studied harder. Meanwhile, Agat quietly thought that there had to be a way, a perfect solution. Suddenly, she turned around and saw that Coco had managed to produce a flame. Coco said she had done it. Agat was curious why she was drawing a fireball at a time like this. Tatia, on the other hand, was amazed that Coco had balanced it properly. She asked when Coco had learned to do that, since she had struggled so much with it earlier. Coco proudly answered that she had just been practicing it while watching them work, repeating it over and over until she finally got it. Scattered around her were sheets of paper she had used for practice. They had not expected that. Tatia praised Coco, saying it was impressive that she had pulled it off. Agat put her hat back on and did not seem impressed. She said that anyone could do it if they repeated it enough. Still, something clicked for her. Repetition was the answer. That was what they needed to do. Just then, the dragon stood up, and Coco warned everyone that it was moving. The dragon slowly approached the cloud they had created. As it tested the cloud, they waited quietly, sitting still. Agat realized that all they needed to do to keep the cloud from falling apart was to wrap the seal in a spell of repetition. No matter how it changed, it would be forced to return to its original form. The spell she used included a sign of repetition, a wall breaker, and a billow cluster. This might be the solution. No matter how many times the dragon dropped its weight onto it, the cloud would keep returning to its original shape, staying soft and light. That was why they would call it the Dragon Disable Cushion, or so they said. Riche, feeling a bit jealous of the dragon now resting comfortably, called it a Lazen Lizard. But Agat disagreed and said they would call it the Serpent's Bed of Sand instead. Proves mysterious sounding, Tatia commented. Coco praised Agat, saying her idea was amazing. However, there was no time to celebrate. This was their chance, so they started moving away. As they went down, Coco noticed that Tatia was still standing there, staring off into the distance. Around the tower, a very narrow staircase came into view, and the four of Kifri's apprentices climbed it to approach the seal. As they ascended, Coco noticed something about Tatia. She asked what was wrong and why she seemed distracted. She answered that she was just thinking about how happy the dragon looked. It was sleeping so peacefully. It was the first time her spell had ever brought joy to someone else, and it felt incredibly good. Even if the spell did not turn out exactly the way she had originally imagined, the feeling was still there. Coco replied that the sand really did look like a cloud, so it still counted. Riche then called out to them, saying she had found it. Moments later, they were standing right in front of the seal. They all stared at it with curiosity, wondering what kind of spell it could be, since they had never seen anything like it before. Agat, in particular, wondered whether Master Kifri would even be able to decipher it. Meanwhile, back in Kalm, Kifri was already out of breath from searching for his apprentices. He followed the brush buddy to track down their location. When he asked whether the girls had gone that way, the brush buddy responded in confirmation. Still, Kifri hesitated, realizing that they were no longer there. They must have already moved on. Tarda then noticed something and voiced his confusion, saying that the alley had once been made of cobblestone. Since when had it been replaced? Kifri felt a chill run through him as a realization struck. He remembered that the brush buddy was drawn to the scent of ink, and just as he thought, he spotted it lingering at the side, sniffing at something. Kifri reached for the stone it was clinging to, and what he noticed made him uneasy. At that moment, something strange suddenly occurred. It was as if a portal to another place had opened. Violent winds engulfed the surroundings, including the place where his apprentices were. The girls were startled by it as well. Agat demanded to know why someone had struck the seal without thinking. Tatia replied that she believed that was the very reason they had been trapped there in the first place. Coco suddenly called out to them, telling them to look up. The sky was visible above them now, and there was a hole there. She thought that might be their exit. At that instant, the dragon's tail appeared behind them and slammed directly into the staircase where they were standing, having awakened due to the surge of wind. Coco and Agat both lost their balance, and Agat panicked when she realized she was not wearing her sylph shoes. She squeezed her eyes shut, unable to think of what to do. No matter how hard she tried, she could not come up with a solution. Just then, Master Kifri caught her. He lifted her up, and they found themselves face to face with the raging dragon. When Kifri noticed this, he told her to hold on tightly. He pulled out a large sheet of paper and drew a spell. As a result, a massive dragon made entirely of water burst forth. With it, He defeated the dragon that his apprentices had been unable to overcome. Agat could hardly believe what she was seeing, while Kifri reassured her that everything was fine now. Tetia, on the verge of tears, stared at him in shock. Agat asked how he had managed to get there, and Kifri replied that he had been searching for them and had been pulled inside. He then asked whether the four of them were all right. That was when they noticed that Coco was not there. They searched for her, but amid the still howling winds. It turns out that the brim cap, which had already taken her. Coco lay unconscious as she was caught in his grasp. He insisted that he had waited a long time for the seed to finally bear fruit. Coco, however, did not hear him at all. The witch asked what she thought of the task he had given her, and whether it had made her stronger. He released her into the air and declared that he would teach her things Kifri could never teach. When the time came, that moment would be glorious. He added that he would at least send her home with a small gift. Coco was lying on the ground when she slowly opened her eyes, hearing her name being called over and over. It turned out to be her companions. She was startled when she saw Master Kifri and everyone else there. As she sat up, she asked if they were already back in town. Kifri replied that he was just glad they had found her. He said that she had collapsed on the staircase. Coco could not remember that at all. Kifri grew uneasy and asked whether she had lost her memory. Had something been erased? What did she remember? If the brimmed caps had done anything to her, she needed to say so. However, Coco answered that she was fine. Everything just felt a bit hazy when she woke up, but she remembered everything. The masked witch, the dragon, all of it. She apologized to her master, and then to Agat, Riche, and Tetia. She said it was her fault that they had all been dragged into that mess. Kifri remained quiet in front of her. He said that Tetia had already told him everything that happened. That made Coco nervous. Kifri then took her hat and placed it back on her head, saying that the story was about how she had saved all of them. Coco began to tear up. Kifri added that ideas were just as crucial to magic as skill with a pen. She had to make sure that they continued to grow, along with her hands. When Kifri stood up, there was a different air about him. He called over Mr. Nalnoa, who had just arrived. The old man was relieved to see that they were all safe. Kifri replied that they were, and he thanked him for Tarta's assistance. However, if it was all right, he had one more request. He handed over a fragment of stone engraved with a spell. He explained that the back of the cobblestone contained part of a seal, and he wanted to know whether Nalnoa could identify the components mixed into the ink used there. As Kifri handed it to Tarta to pass to his grandfather, he added that, if possible, they should not mention anything that had happened that day to the Knight Moralis. The two of them were shocked. Mr. Nalnoa could not believe it, since reporting sightings of forbidden magic was required by law. But Kifri was serious in insisting that they tell no one. Mr. Nalnoa was taken aback and suddenly said that he wanted to know what had really happened there, which surprised his grandson. Or perhaps, he added, they should be thinking about what would happen next. At last, Kifri and his apprentices were together again. In the next scene, a massive bird was shown flying through the sky near Kifri's atelier. Coco, peeking out from the window, simply watched it. She let out a sigh, lost in deep thought. She found herself recalling everything that had happened before. Because they had rushed so desperately to return after the incident in Kelm, she had not even managed to get a pen of her own. She only stared at the pigment stone resting in her hand. Using it, she could draw clean, straight lines. However, it could only produce straight lines. It did not turn out well when used on small pieces of paper, and it was no good when she was in a hurry. She groaned and flopped onto her back. She thought about how she had not drawn even a single spell that had truly helped them. Her master had said that ideas were just as important as magic, but even so, she still felt torn. She suddenly sat up, trying to stop herself from spiraling further. She knew she would only feel worse if she kept thinking about it. All she needed was to get used to drawing. She had to keep practicing over and over again. She tried to cheer herself up, telling herself that she could do it. With that, she picked up the wand Kifri had given her and prepared to practice. However, she felt overwhelmingly sleepy and ended up lying back down. She tried to push herself upright again, wondering why she felt like that. Just when she thought she was finally ready, exhaustion washed over her. She began to think that maybe it was some kind of sleep spell. A voice cut in, saying that no one there would ever cast such a forbidden spell in that atelier. It turned out to be Kifri, greeting her as she nodded off. He insisted that she would catch a cold if she slept there. Coco rubbed her eyes and said that she did not want to sleep. Every time she decided to study, she said she suddenly felt tired. Kifri was surprised when she went on to say that she felt useless. How could she expect to pass the librarian's trial and find that picture book if she was like this? Coco immediately waved her hands, trying to brush away the negative thoughts. She insisted that it was not how she truly felt. She said she could do it, and that she was passionate about magic. Kifri placed a book on top of her head and told her that was enough for now. They would take a break from studying, he said, and he led her away. He took her to the kitchen, and as they went down the stairs, Coco immediately noticed how fragrant it was. Kifri took out a pot and said that it was about time to finish what was left inside. He offered her a taste. When Coco scooped some up and tried it, she was completely blown away by how good it was. Kifri agreed. He said he had been keeping that stew there for 2 whole years. Coco was shocked when she heard that. Humming to himself, Kifri told her not to worry. It would not hurt her. That magic cook pot preserved the flavor as if it had just come off the stove. Of course, the spells had to be redrawn from time to time. Time was not always kind to seals, after all. He then took out some carapace yams, which Coco recognized right away. She had tasted them before, and they were really delicious. Kifri asked if it was all right for her to cook them. He had heard that she had learned how to draw a proper fireball. With that, Coco took out some paper and her wand and carefully drew the spell. As a result, a flame appeared. However, when she placed a yam over it, the fire vanished. Kifri cautioned her. Carapace yams were heavy, so she needed to make the signs longer than usual. Coco tried again, but the flame came out far too small the next time. Kifri said that would not work either. It needed to be nice and even. When she tried once more, the flame became too large. Kifri let out an oops and said it looked like the sigil was too big this time. After several attempts, Coco finally found the right size. She even put a cloth over her nose as a mask for the smoke. A short while later, she finished the preparation. Coco proudly declared that she had cooked it to perfection. Steam even rose from the yam. Kifri clapped at the result. He picked it up, sliced it, and praised her, saying she had done a good job. He then asked how she was feeling. She had drawn several seals, after all. Was she still sleepy? Coco had not expected that question. Kifri went on to explain that for him, water magic had been the easiest to learn. He was not very good at swimming, and more than anything, he truly hated getting wet. So he worked hard to master water-related magic so that he would not have to wash things by hand. When you are eager to learn something, he said, and you need to improve as quickly as possible, the solution is to make it part of your everyday life. After all, there is no teacher greater than life itself. Coco was deeply impressed by what he told her. She quietly observed him, thinking about his words, about making magic a part of daily life. Kifri gave her a thumbs up and recommended cooking. That way, her practice would come with its own delicious rewards. He said it was a great deal. To Coco, it sounded perfect. Tatia and the others peeked in on them. They came down to the kitchen because they had smelled something delicious. It looked really good. Tatia raised her hand to volunteer to melt cheese over the yams. Riche asked if they could use magic to give them grill marks, since that would be really cool. But Kifri apologized to them and said that for that day, he wanted Coco to be in charge of their food. Coco had not expected to be entrusted with that task. The two of them protested, saying it was not fair. Meanwhile, Riche was practically drooling with hunger and said she was already starving. When Kifri asked for Coco's opinion, Coco smiled and agreed. Kifri helped by scraping the contents of what he was holding, and he also spread something like butter on the bread. Riche, still drooling, sliced the bacon. On the other side, Kifri fried the eggs. Coco and Tatia laughed together while they made dumplings. Kifri placed slices of cheese on top of the buns, which Coco then melted using magic. She focused intensely on keeping the temperature just right so it would not burn, with Kifri standing behind her, guiding her. Smiles spread across their faces when they saw the final result of their hard work. Everything they had prepared looked incredibly appetizing. There was the freshly cooked 2-year-old stew that tasted fresh thanks to repetition magic. There was also the tempting carapace yam, bacon and egg sandwich served on buns with melted lion goat cheese, 2 pieces of bread stuffed with delicious fillings. Lastly, there were carapace yam dumplings, steamed yams mixed with squash. Tatia was impressed by how many vegetables there were. She remarked that their master hardly ever ate that healthily. Kifri just scratched his head and laughed. Coco thought it would be nice if they went outside to eat. Kifri asked if she meant like a picnic, and it seemed like a good idea. Coco then noticed Agat and called out to her. She invited her to join them and have lunch outside together. However, Agat declined and said no thanks. She still needed to practice, and she would just eat at her own desk. Besides, she asked, had they seen what it was like outside? When they looked out, they were shocked to realize that the weather had already turned bad. Because they had been so busy, they had not even noticed that it had started to rain. Tatia felt regretful, saying that just a while ago the weather had been absolutely perfect. Since there was nothing they could do about it, Coco suggested that they go back, especially since Master Kifri had mentioned before that he did not like getting wet. Kifri only looked at her and asked why they should let a little rain stop them just because of their meal. After all, they were witches. He created a protective bubble, blocking the rain completely. In that way, they were able to walk outside without getting wet. The apprentices were delighted by this. From inside, Agat peeked out while carrying her food, watching them. The rain continued to fall steadily, much to the enjoyment of the animals around them. Kifri and his apprentices settled beneath a bridge and stayed there. There was a lamp set up, and he served each of them stew one by one. The brush buddy rested on Coco's shoulder as she ate, and they all enjoyed the meal together. After a while, they noticed the sun beginning to rise. They were amazed as the surroundings slowly brightened. As the rain weakened, Kifri said that the clouds were starting to break apart. Coco was overjoyed at the sight. She stood up and ran off. When Kifri asked what she was doing, she answered that she was going to get Agat. She could not let her miss this. She wanted her to see the magic that the sky was showing them. And so, while it was still lightly drizzling, she ran back toward the Atelier. When she was about to open the door, she was surprised when it opened on its own. Shock was evident on her face when she saw a man inside, who immediately asked who she was. He said he had never seen her face there before. What did she need, and who had sent her? Was she one of Elira's messengers? Coco did not expect the barrage of questions, and out of sheer nervousness, she could not answer right away. Just then, Kifri arrived and asked whether everything was all right. Coco hurriedly hid beneath his cloak, and Kifri said that he was an apprentice of him. The man was taken aback and said he could not believe that Kifri had taken on yet another apprentice. He glared and demanded an explanation from Kifri. Kifri first greeted him with a casual "good to see you," addressing him as Arujo. He asked whether Arujo was finished with his work, since he had thought it would take longer. Arujo, in turn, was curious as to when Kifri's little group of apprentices had grown. Kifri insisted that this was a special case, explaining that Coco was a victim of forbidden magic. The moment Arujo heard about forbidden spells, he immediately grabbed Coco and pulled her along with him. Kifri had no choice but to call out his name. Arujo replied that they had nothing to do with the brimmed caps, and that he would be handing the child over to the Knights Moralis. Coco grew tense upon hearing this, unsure of what to do. He told Coco that he would be taking her to the Knights Moralis. Coco struggled against him and pleaded desperately. From behind, Kifri pulled out his palm choir and wand and began to draw a spell. As a result, water rose up from the floor, something that left Coco utterly stunned. It formed into a wall that blocked their path. They were forced to stop, and when Coco looked back, she saw Kifri kneeling there, maintaining the spell through the water. He said that he would not allow him to take Coco away, no matter how close they were as friends. Arujo could not believe that Kifri had used magic against him. He demanded to know who the girl was to him. He released Coco, who was visibly shaken. The wall of water Kifri had created collapsed, and he asked them to come inside, saying that he would explain everything there. Tatia and Riche could be seen hurrying inside as well, using the pots and bowls they had used for eating as makeshift covers over their heads. While Tatia wiped Riche with a towel, she remarked that the weather had seemed to improve earlier, but now the rain had grown even stronger. When a gust of wind blew in through the window, she said it was going to be a stormy night. Riche agreed that it was going to be rough. Near the furnace, Kifri, Coco, and Arujo spoke together. Arujo wanted to understand what had happened. He could not believe that Kifri's judgment had deemed this a special circumstance that justified taking in an outsider as an apprentice. Kifri objected to the term, saying that it was not a good one, and that her name was Coco. Orujo said he had not intended to be rude to Coco, explaining that they simply used that word to describe people who were not witches. Kifri asked if this was their first meeting. Coco, for her part, had not even known that someone else lived there. Kifri introduced Orujo to Coco, explaining that he was the watchful eye of their atelier. Places like Kaun and the Great Hall offered many chances to interact with other witches, but a small rural atelier like theirs could easily become cut off from the world. Because of that, they followed a rule. To ensure that no problem would simply be buried and ignored, a second senior witch was assigned to small ateliers. They called this role their watchful eye. Orujo found it hard to believe that he was the one explaining that, considering he had been busy sweeping away what he thought was a particularly large problem. He remarked that there was nothing ironic about that at all. Kifri replied that if Coco's memories had been erased that night, then the only clue they had to finding the picture book containing the forbidden spells would be lost. That book, he said, was likely their best chance to restore Coco's mother as well. When Kifri mentioned the clue, Orujo reminded him that it was not their job to investigate forbidden magic. That, he said, was precisely why the Knights Moralis existed. Coco listened carefully as the two of them continued their discussion. When Kifri noticed the expression on her face, he realized that she clearly wanted to know who the Knights Moralis were. Coco had not expected her curiosity to be that obvious. Kifri explained that the Knights Moralis, more properly called the Order of Moral Spellcasting, were witches who had sworn to uphold the principles established on the day of the pact. Their duty was to erase the memories of people who discovered the secret of magic, as well as the memories of witches who interfered with forbidden spells. They carried out their work without emotion. There was no debate, no exceptions. If she were to fall into their hands, it would not only be her memories that would be taken from her, they would also erase her passion and zeal for magic. At that, everyone fell silent. Kifri suddenly patted Coco on the back and told her that she was a good girl. She worked very hard. She was an obedient child, and she possessed a deep love for magic. The fact that she had learned the secret was his fault, not hers. And so, if Coco's memories were truly to be erased, then his should be erased as well. Orujo could hardly believe what he was hearing. He scratched his head, at a loss for words. He pointed toward Titia and the others who had been eavesdropping and said that when Kifri decided to take in 3 apprentices, he had thought that things would finally settle down. It seemed that had only been wishful thinking. Orujo stood up and agreed to let Coco remain there, which left Kifri stunned. However, Orujo added that if even the slightest problem were to arise, he would report it directly to the Great Hall. That, after all, was his duty. When Coco heard this, she tried to speak to Master Kifri, but he quieted her and told her there was no need to worry. Most of Orujo's time, he explained, was consumed by requests to fashion contraptions. He rarely emerges from his own atelier at the far end of the catwalk, and they often went days without seeing him. As Kifri helped Coco to her feet, he added that she had passed the trial through her own effort. Because of that, she could stand tall and proud as a full-fledged apprentice. And since she looked soaked from the rain, he instructed her to take a bath before she caught a cold. Coco answered that she would. When Coco reached her room, she called for her little brush buddy, telling it that it was time to take a bath. She looked around for it. Suddenly, it popped out from under the bed and shook itself right in front of her. She immediately noticed that the brush buddy was soaking wet. It suddenly leapt off her shoulder and darted away, and Coco told it to come back. However, it kept going and slipped into one of the rooms nearby. The brush buddy crept inside slowly, which made Coco panic. Why had it gone in there, she wondered. That was the worst room it could have chosen. She hurried after it and followed it inside. Just as she was about to knock on the door, she read the sign that said anyone who knocked would be cursed. She stopped herself at once. That was terrifying. Instead, she peeked inside and asked in a whisper whether anyone was there. She softly called out for her little brush buddy, hoping it would come back out, because it would catch a cold if it stayed wet any longer. A moment later, she suddenly sneezed. Startled by the noise she had made, she froze. Orujo abruptly sat up, holding the brush buddy, and said that if the door clearly stated not to knock, then it meant he did not want anyone in his room at all. Coco looked up to listen to him, but instead of being afraid, she froze in awe. Orujo floated down toward her and asked whether she could hear him. He tossed the brush buddy back to her, and Coco immediately apologized. She was surprised when she touched it. It's been soaking wet just a moment ago. How had it dried so quickly? Then something happened that Coco had not expected. She was suddenly enveloped in magic, coming from the rings Arujo wore on his thumbs. Coco felt delighted, because the sensation was warm and comforting. It felt as though her hair had dried as well. She grew curious and wondered whether that was one of Arujo's spells. Afterward, Coco thanked him. Arujo merely turned away and said that it was part of his job. If she caught a cold, it would become his problem too. Coco had not expected that he was also watching over their health. Arujo shot her a sharp look and admitted that it was his fault for leaving the door open. He removed his rings and promptly sent her away, telling her not to touch anything on her way out. However, while his back was still turned, he was startled by Coco suddenly shouting. He turned around and reminded her that he had just told her not to touch anything. Coco, however, was completely enthralled by the magic she had seen. She recognized it. Kneeling on the floor, she said that the cobblestones there lit up when stepped on. She had walked along them on the day she first fell in love with magic. Arujo explained that the glowstone path was the contraption he was most famous for. It consisted of layered stones, one etched with a sigil and another with a ring. When stepped on, the seal was completed. He demonstrated how it worked. It was a simple design. He could not understand how anyone could find it so appealing. He was startled when Coco reached down and touched the floor. He asked what she thought she was doing. Coco, meanwhile, was utterly amazed as the stones began to glow. Well, she said, that was exactly what they should be doing. Coco admitted that the light was incredibly special to her. Whenever the stones beneath her feet lit up, she felt as if there was magic inside her. Just by stepping on them one by one, she had been filled with overwhelming joy on that day. However, not all of her memories tied to that place were happy ones. That had also been the day she bought the picture book and the day her mother told her that she was not allowed to use magic. Even so, those stones and that magic had given her a dream for the future. And so, she smiled and thanked the one she called Master Arujo for creating them. Arujo had not expected to hear such words. He ushered her and the brush buddy out and said that he was not her master. With that, they left. Arujo paused briefly before entering his room. He could not believe that the Knights Moralis would strip away her passion for magic as well if they ever caught her. He then went inside his room. Elsewhere, someone could be seen practicing drawing a spell. It was Agat, who was clearly frustrated. She felt like she could not think properly at all. She wished the wind would just quiet down for a moment. Letting out a sigh, she told herself that it was fine. It was good practice for her concentration anyway. She closed her eyes and tried drawing the spell again. With her eyes shut, she focused and completed the spell. When she finally looked at the result, she had managed to draw it cleanly. She felt pleased when it worked and the spell activated. It was not perfectly even yet, but it was much better than before. She had even managed to close the ring on her first attempt. That meant she was ready for the next test and to gain real experience. Feeling fired up, she tried drawing another spell with her eyes closed. Suddenly, there was a loud pounding on the door. Annoyed, she stormed out to demand what all the noise was about and asked if they could keep it down. It turned out that a visitor had arrived and was speaking with Kifri. Outside, rain was pouring heavily as the man pleaded with Kifri, begging for his help. The apprentices were puzzled by this. Agat stepped closer out of curiosity and asked what was going on. Tatia told her that the situation was bad. The bridge over the staircase river had collapsed because of the relentless rain. A carriage full of people was stranded in the middle of the water, and the current was far too strong for anyone to approach and rescue them. The man repeatedly begged Kifri for help. His child was among those trapped in the carriage. Kifri reassured him that he would help and said that they would head there immediately. Hearing this, Agat realized that this was her chance to gain real, hands-on experience using magic. She rushed over to her master at once. Kifri turned to her and called her name, but insisted that it was far too dangerous and that all four of them should stay behind. Agat refused to accept that. She pleaded to go with him, saying that she wanted to come along. She was ready to prove how useful she could be. She knew that she was capable. In the next scene, they went to the carriage that the man who asked them for help had mentioned while riding on their respective horses. While Agat and Arujo followed the hooded man, he informed them that the bridge was just beyond a tall pine tree and that they were already close to it. Arujo then told Agat to hold tightly to what she was carrying and Agat tightened her grip around it even more and replied that she would not drop it. Orujo stared for a moment and fell into thought, and the scene shifted a few minutes back to when Agat was insisting and pleading with Kifri that she wanted to join the rescue and wanted real experience. She expressed that she was ready to prove how useful she could be, and that she knew she was capable of it. Kifri gently told her that it would not be like the normal exercises they performed at the Atelier. He explained that there would be many people around them there who were not witches. He added that she had not yet taken the second test, and she did not have permission to cast in front of those people. Just as Kifri was about to say that he would bring her along next time while moving his hand closer to her, Agat slapped it away and replied by asking when that would even happen, then pointed out that this was her chance right now. She said that she had been training herself for this, so she would be ready to cast in front of others, and that she had long been preparing for the next test. She insisted that was it not the duty of a master to give his apprentices opportunities to grow, to which Kifri replied that of course it was, but before he could add anything more, the hooded man asked again and said that they needed to hurry and that there was no more time to waste. Orujo then volunteered that he would go ahead first while getting dressed, and he explained that they would set up the exit for the windowway at the site. He also told the others to gather the medicine and contraptions they would need, and that they should simply enter the portal once it was open, then added that he would take Agat along as well, which greatly delighted her. Agat quickly moved because of that, and said that she would get her cloak and cap. Kifri's uncertainty about the situation was visible while he looked at Orujo, so Orujo told him not to look at him that way. He said that there were things his apprentices could only learn outside. Kifri responded that he was simply concerned, and he explained that Agat had a tendency to focus on the things she had not yet learned rather than rejoicing in the things she had already learned. In his thoughts, he said that he wished Agat would see that there was no shame in being inexperienced, and he added that he simply did not want her to stumble while rushing to grow. After that, the scene returned to the present where they had already reached the edge of the bridge that the man had mentioned. Orujo commented that the ground was somewhat unstable, while the hooded man immediately pointed to where the carriage was and asked if he could see it, and it was shown that it was stuck between rocks while being battered by the strong currents of the river. They examined it carefully and saw 3 individuals watching it, as well from a closer area. They approached them, and the old man there commented that he could not believe it. He shouted with excitement while running that what they were seeing were witches, and the woman with him added that Dagda had brought them a witch. The woman thanked the heavens in her joy and said that everything would be fine now, and the old man added that those witches would save the others inside the carriage, while another man quickly spread the word that a witch had arrived there. On Agat's side, she stared at them with her mouth slightly open, but Orujo caught her attention by handing her a pouch. He asked her if she knew how to use those, and when Agat took out the item inside, it was explained that they were called link rings, a contraption fashioned as a pair of 2 rings. Each ring was adorned with half of a seal, and their spell would activate when both parts were pressed together. The small size of those contraptions limited the power and range of the user. Orujo informed Agat that the spell in those rings evaporated moisture, then instructed her to use them to dry the villagers' clothes, which immediately caught her attention. Orujo also said that once she finished that, she should stay there and wait, so Agat asked if he only wanted her to use a contraption and nothing more. Just as she was about to ask if there was not something more serious for her to do, Orujo agreed and said that was the only thing she would be doing. He then questioned her by asking if she did not want to do the task simply because it was too easy. He added that Kifri was right to worry about Agat, pointing out that she was too anxious about advancing, which Agat simply listened to. He added that if she wanted to show her skills, there would be times and places where she could do that. But if she wanted to help right now, he suggested that she reconsider the purpose that magic served. Orujo then continued drawing the seal after that, while Agat began thinking about how she could possibly avoid feeling anxious about advancing when everyone treated her like a helpless child. As Orujo continued drawing, the old villager pointed out that the man had turned a plain cloth into a doorway, then commented that it was incredible, while on Agat's side, she thought that practicing twice as much as all of them meant nothing if she had nothing to show for it. After a while, Kifri emerged from the other side of the portal that Orujo had created, and Agat added in her thoughts that if she wanted to show a certain someone what she was truly capable of, she could not afford to wait. When Coco saw the serious look on her face as she stepped out of the doorway, she wondered inwardly if she was all right. Her attention was then drawn by the loud gasp of the people there who were watching something by the river. A girl anxiously asked if that was serious, while the old man said that there was something else there. Tatia stopped them and explained that the edges of the bank were unstable, so she asked them to step back. Coco also peeked at that moment, and when she looked, she saw Kifri place his sword into the water, causing the water around him to surge outward so that it would not strike them, while Orujo began helping the people inside the carriage. The onlookers could hardly believe what they were seeing, and even asked if Kifri had truly split the raging current using a sword. On Kifri's side, he called out to Orujo and asked how many people were there, to which he replied that there were 3 and that he was already carrying the second one. Kifri groaned at the difficulty of holding back the current and said that the river was not making their situation any easier, then commented that this was exactly why he hated water. Orujo told him to just hold on and said that he was already moving as fast as he can. After Orujo rescued the second civilian, he jumped back into the carriage, and after a moment he came out again carrying a young boy, so he immediately shouted to Kifri that he had the last one, to which Kifri took his stance and replied that he understood. He sent an upward slash toward the rushing water in front of him, which caused a wave and pushed that portion of water aside and away from them. Once they managed to rescue them, Kifri let out a sigh of relief, and Orujo gave him a high five while excitedly saying that they had done it and that all the victims were safe, to which Kifri replied that it was a job well done. They then landed beside the people, where Dagda immediately ran toward the person they had rescued, his son named Custis, who also called out to his father. Custis immediately apologized to Dagda and explained that he had tried to save his cargo but that it had ended up like that, to which Dagda said that it did not matter anymore and that he was simply happy that he was safe. Dagda helped him stand and added that he could never thank the two of them enough, but they replied that it was not necessary and that they were simply glad they had arrived in time. Kifri explained that his apprentices had brought healing agents with them, but just as he was about to add that they would be happy to treat their injuries, he fell silent when he saw his apprentices completely focused on the water sword. Coco was clearly delighted as she said that it was absolutely amazing. Riche commented that it was unreal. Even Agat had her attention drawn to it and said that it was fairly intriguing, and Tatia pointed out in surprise to their master that it was the be-all, end-all of contraptions. It was then explained that the object was called the Rain Cleaver, a mystical sword capable of separating any liquid it touched. Kifri commented that it seemed all of them had noticed the Rain Cleaver. He pointed out the pattern engraved on it and explained that it was made from countless seals etched across its surface. Even the small seals, he said, when present in great enough numbers, have the power to part the sea itself. Tatia and Coco then asked if they could hold it, but he immediately returned it to its sheath and gently refused. Kifri explained that magic cast into weapons must be used with the utmost care, and he was concerned that the object was still too dangerous for them. However, if they wished, he would gladly explain precisely how the small seals worked in concert once they returned to the Atelier. Orujo then called out to Kifri while packing up the place where he had created the doorway and said that he would check upstream just to make sure they had not left anyone behind, since the river might have already eroded other areas as well. Then Kifri said that in that case he would assess the damage downstream, and he asked Tatia if she would accompany him, to which she happily replied yes. Orujo, on the other hand, chose Riche to go with him, and she immediately followed. Before they left, Kifri told Agat and Coco to watch over the area where they were, while Orujo said that they would not be gone for long. Coco happily waved and said that they would handle it, but she was surprised when she realized that she and Agat had been assigned to do it together, while Agat gave her an irritated look. As Coco wrapped a bandage around the man they had rescued, she commented inwardly that the situation was extremely awkward, and she thought that she needed to hurry and return Agat's silk shoes. After a while, she finished placing a splint on the man, and the man happily thanked her deeply and called her Little Miss Witch. Because of that, Coco felt a great flutter of joy and excitement, and she became flustered at the side while repeatedly thinking that the man had called her Little Miss Witch. The man also commented that it was truly a shame that they had lost the greater half of their cargo, but he had decided that they would simply make do, explaining that they were still alive, and that was what mattered most. The old man then said that was indeed true, and while he was saying that nothing was more precious than life itself, it was cut off when they heard Dagda shouting at Custis. It turned out that Custis was going down toward the river while his body was tied to a tree at the edge of the bank, and Dagda shouted at him that whatever he was trying to do was not worth it, then told him to come back, which left Coco worried as well. Custis replied while going down that it would be fine and explained that the bank curved inward there and that some of their cargo was caught in the swirling current. As the tree he was tied to slowly leaned toward the ditch, he added that he would just grab it and come right back. Dagda shouted at him not to be a fool and said that the bank only curved inward because part of it had already been washed away by the water. While Dagda was still trying to talk to Custis and urging him to climb back up quickly, the tree where Custis was tied suddenly gave way, leaving fear and worry clearly visible on the faces of Dagda and Agat. A large portion of the edge then completely collapsed, causing smoke and dust to rise around the area, and Dagda began to panic and could hardly believe what had just happened. He immediately tried to jump toward Custis, but the old man and Agat stopped him while saying that he must not do that because the bank might collapse again. Agat then called out to Coco and said that they needed her help, but when she turned her head, she saw that Coco was no longer beside them. Agat became worried and wondered if Coco had been caught in the falling rocks, when suddenly she heard a voice calling her name. So she immediately turned toward where the voice was coming from. She saw Coco there holding on to rocks while in the water, shouting that she's over there so that they could see where she was. Agat asked if she was all right and if she was hurt, and Coco replied that she was fine. But unfortunately, she said that Custis had been pinned under a rock, and the aftermath of the accident could clearly be seen there. Dagda's eyes widened in alarm when he heard that, but he suddenly seemed to realize something and appeared to have thought of an idea. He asked Agat that wasn't she a witch, which left her confused. Dagda tightened his grip on her shoulders and began insisting that she could save his son using her magic. He desperately pleaded and said that she must save him, which startled Agat. But deep inside, she felt delighted and thought that this was finally her chance to prove herself. She asked herself if she was not right after all, and she pointed out inwardly that Kifri and Arujo were not there. She did not have her sylph shoes, so she could not go down to where Custis was. Coco could not move, and it was a life or death situation. She then smirked and thought that by saving Custis using her magic, she might finally prove to that certain someone she was thinking of that he was wrong. The man with the broken arm approached her and called her Little Witch, then asked if she was about to use magic now. The people there began talking among themselves about what Agat would do. One of them said that it looked like she was going to save Custis, while another asked if she could really do that, and another replied that she might be young, but she was still a witch. One of the others then wondered what kind of spell they would see now, which prompted another to ask how he could even talk about that when Custis was in danger. So the man who said it replied that Agat had magic and that she would surely bring Custis back to them. Agat began to feel overwhelmed about what she was about to do, and she suddenly heard a voice telling her to go on and show them what she could do. At that moment, Agat suddenly remembered people comparing her to other children and saying that was supposed to be her magic, and that it did not measure up to the others. There had also been a time when someone pushed her to put more heart into what she was doing, saying that she was not untalented, but simply average. Someone had also expressed disappointment because they had high expectations for her, saying that it was strange because her mother was extremely talented, yet she could not live up to it. There had also been someone who said that gifted children were capable of far more things at her age compared to her, asking if she even practiced at all and pointing out that she was still just a child. She also remembered one of the things that had left the deepest impression on her, when someone told her that she would not become his apprentice and that they did not need dull children in that family. She became irritated and felt a heavy weight in her chest while thinking about why she had to start remembering those things now, of all times. Coco then called out her name, catching her attention, and when Agat looked at her, she immediately told her to say what she could do and how she could help from where she was. Coco asked what Agat could do to save Custis, which brought her back to reality and startled her. She remembered what Arujo had told her earlier, that if she wanted to help here and now, he suggested that she reconsider what purpose magic truly served. She clenched her hands while they rested on her lap and shouted Coco's name. She asked what things looked like down there and told her to describe the situation to her. Coco looked around her surroundings, and before long she explained that the current was not as strong where they were and that she did not think they needed to worry about being swept downstream. However, she added that the water level was slowly rising and that they might not have much time left. She also said that the bank was muddy and slippery and that she did not think she could climb it. Custis was unconscious, and the rock crushing him looked too large even for an adult to move. Agat then asked about her magic, so Coco showed her the bag that was already drenched in water, which meant that it would no longer work there. Agat began thinking about their situation, that Kifri and Arujo were not there. She did not have her sylph shoes, so she could not reach them. Coco could not move, and the components had been soaked and could no longer be used. On top of that, she was surrounded by people who did not know about magic, and she said that she must not allow them to see her casting anything. She then began wondering what she should do while Coco continued shouting her name. At that moment, both of them asked what they should do, but on Agat's side it was a question directed to herself, while Coco was asking for her idea about how she could help. While that was happening, the scene suddenly shifted to the Great Hall, the headquarters of the Knights Morales, which appeared to be underwater like Atlantis. There, a subordinate called out to someone named Sir Aestheus and informed him that they had received reports of a large and unknown column of water that had been spotted near Calm, upstream of the marshwoods. When Sir Aestheus heard that, he told them to go there immediately. We returned to the situation of Coco and Agat after that, where Coco was still asking what she could do, while Agat was asking what she herself should do. Coco thought that if only she could use her magic here, it would be easy, but when that thought crossed her mind, she suddenly realized something that made her gasp. She immediately caught Agat's attention and asked if the things she was referring to were there, which left Agat wondering what those were. Coco made hand gestures to explain what they looked like because she could not remember what they were called, but when she said she meant the things that Arujo had made, she remembered that they were rings. Because of that, Agat also realized what Coco was referring to and immediately took out a small pouch and called them the link rings. She tied them to a branch and said that if she could get them to Coco, they might have a chance. After that, she threw them toward Coco, and fortunately Coco was good at catching, so she managed to grab them. Coco immediately took out the link rings and thought that with those she could dry her soaked choir. As she put them on and prepared herself, she also thought that if she could just get a piece of dry paper, she could use the levitation spell she had learned earlier to save Custis. However, she said that she could not allow the people there to see how magic was cast. Because of that, she paused and realized that she could not do it while those people were watching. She then began looking for another way, and when Agat saw what she was doing, she commented in her mind that Coco did not give up even when facing overwhelming adversity. Even so, a task like this was still beyond her. Agat explained that when a witch cast a spell in front of outsiders, the hands, the pen, and the paper had to remain hidden deep within the long folds of the witch's cloak. As a result, the strokes of the pen could not be verified by sight, and therefore the seal had to be composed by touch, a feat that required long hours of training. After that, Agat glanced at the people standing there, then turned her gaze back to Coco, who was still searching for a way. Before long, determination appeared in Agat's eyes, and she immediately drew the attention of the people watching there. She did exactly what she had described earlier by drawing beneath her long cloak, and she introduced herself as the witch Agat Arclom, the first apprentice of Kifri. She told them that now she would show the power that resided within her while secretly drawing on her palm choir. In her thoughts, she said that the purpose of long hours of training was to allow a person to act in times of need without fear or hesitation. That feat, she thought, was far beyond Coco, but perhaps she herself could pull it off. After a few moments of drawing, a magnificent phoenix-like bird suddenly emerged from her cloak and flew straight upward into the air, its light spreading across the entire surroundings. The people were astonished when they saw it, and even Coco said wow and commented that Agat's spells were incredibly beautiful. Agat then glanced at Coco and thought that it should hold the people's attention for at least a moment, and she signaled to her that if she was going to try something, she should do it now. Coco understood the meaning of her gaze, so Coco's face turned serious and she thanked her inwardly. Using all her strength, she lifted herself onto the surface of the rock and looked at her injured right leg, quietly reacting to the pain. She said in her mind that she had practiced the levitation seal on carapace yams just a few hours earlier while positioning herself behind the large rock that was crushing Custis. She shouted that she could do it, that she knew she could, and that it was within her reach. However, when she placed her hands on the boulder, she suddenly froze and lost confidence in herself, telling herself that she could not do it. In her thoughts, she said that she knew she could not because it had only been a few hours since then. That seal had barely been able to lift the yams. To lift that rock, she would need something far larger than what she could draw on her choir. Custis then groaned, which caught her attention. She immediately moved closer to check on him and said that she was glad that he had regained consciousness. Custis was confused when he saw her and asked where he was and who she was. Coco introduced herself to him and informed him that she was a witch. She also said that they had fallen when the bank collapsed, then asked if he remembered that. Custis then said that meant he was still alive. When he saw the bird of light flying in the sky earlier, he had thought that he had already left the world. Coco turned to look at the bird that Agat had conjured and immediately clarified that it was not a messenger of the afterlife, but magic, simply a spell cast by her friend. As she said that her friend had cast it, Coco suddenly realized something and shouted that that was exactly what she needed. She moved away from where Custis was but told him that she would get him out of there, so he should just hold on, which made Custis wonder why she was hiding behind that rock. She said inwardly, while rummaging through the bag she carried, that she could not do it using a levitation seal, but she did not need to limit herself to only her own spells. As the bird of light Agat had created circled in the air, Coco thought that with a spell this flashy, Kifri and Arujo should realize that they were in trouble. However, she could only draw the people's attention away from herself slightly, so she hoped that they would return soon, though she thought things would become bad if they did not. The old man called out to her to get her attention, and Dagda pointed out that her spell was beautiful, but asked if that was all it did. He insisted that she was only lighting up the sky and asked irritably if she was actually trying to help. He asked if she could not make a bird they could ride down there, so that she herself could go and help. Agat tried to apologize, but Dagda suddenly brushed her aside and walked toward the edge to look for his son. He said he could not wait any longer and asked the others for a rope, saying that he would go down himself and rescue him. Agat became alarmed and thought that if he looked over the edge he would see Coco casting. So she tried to stop him and say that he could not go there, but before she could finish speaking, Coco suddenly appeared flying in front of Dagda while she and Custis were riding on her cloak. Coco's face showed that she was almost in tears from the situation and relief, and she asked them to pull them toward the ground because she could not land on her own. Because of that, Dagda and Agat reached for them, and before long they managed to bring them down safely. Dagda anxiously called out his son's name and thanked the heavens that he was safe. Coco's cloak continued flying, which worried her as she tried to erase the seal she had written on it. Shock appeared on Agat's face when she saw what Coco had done, but before she could comment, Coco turned toward her and immediately hugged her. She said that she was so happy, which left Agat confused. Coco said that she was incredibly happy that it had worked and that she had no idea what she should have done. She was also deeply grateful to the heavens that they had managed to succeed. Because of that, Agat slowly pushed her back and told her to calm down. Just as Agat was about to ask how she had managed to escape that situation, she noticed the substance on Coco's fingers and asked if that was sand she was seeing. Coco happily agreed and said that she remembered how they had been saved by the rock-breaking spell the previous day. Agat recalled that it was the spell they had used when they faced the dragon and said that was right. It was the wall breaker seal. As the structure of the seal Coco had drawn was shown, Agat added that if it were drawn small enough, it could turn a boulder into sand without harming the person trapped beneath it. Coco said that was exactly it, and explained that before she had not been able to help even a little, but she had watched what the three of them had drawn, including the one Riche had used. She held her chest and said that it was the magic of her friends that had saved them, and she would never have known how to do it on her own. She added that Agat's shining bird had reminded her of it and thanked her for all the help she had given. Agat replied that the point of that shining signal had been to alert Kifri, and it had only happened to serve another purpose as well, so Coco should not think it had all been for her. As Agat was about to add that she did not remember deciding that they were friends, she stopped when she saw Coco looking seriously toward Dagda and Custis as they embraced each other in relief. Coco said that it made her very happy to know that Custis was safe. Just as she was about to say that one day she would also save her mother, she corrected herself and insisted that she promised she would do it no matter what, which caught Coco's attention. Unexpectedly, ribbons suddenly flew toward them and began circling around the two of them. Before they could react, the ribbons tightened their grip and bound them together. Coco became worried and confused because of that, and the bindings began lifting them into the air. As they floated, Coco asked what those things were, while Agat recognized them as the silver-white capture pennants, which belonged to witches who wore crimson cloaks and winged caps. She could not believe what she was seeing, and it appeared that the Knights Moralis had arrived there, and they were the ones who had captured them. Aestes then suddenly asked which one of them it had been, which confused the two of them. He asked whether Coco had cast that spell or if it had been Agat. He said that their age would not protect them and urged them to speak about which of them was aligned with the brimmed caps. Coco was confused when she heard that, and Agat immediately shouted asking what they were talking about, then said that they were not part of the brimmed caps. She added that none of the magic they had used there was forbidden, and that the only spells they had cast were to help the people. Aestes then pointed and told them to look at what was below, and when they saw it, Coco was completely shocked by what she saw and asked what had happened there. It appeared that a massive portion of the area had turned into sand. She noticed that her spell had not stopped with the rock because even the entire riverbed and the surrounding area had turned into sand. Even the river water itself was breaking apart and turning into mist. In Coco's thoughts, she said there was no way it could have spread that far, and she commented that it was impossible and that it was not what she had drawn at all. Because of that, Aestes realized that she had been the one who cast the spell. He told her that a novice like her could not possibly cast a spell of that power without a violation, then took out a strange amulet. He held the object directly in front of Coco, and a small creature began emerging from it as it tried to reach toward her while saying that the principles of the pact were absolute. After that, he declared that from that moment onward her memories would be taken away. After that, he commented that Coco was trembling for no reason. He explained that when her memories of magic faded, her fear would disappear as well, and she would simply become an outsider. Nothing more, nothing less. Agat then shouted at Aestes to please wait and said that she was telling him he was making a mistake, then asked why he would not listen. Aestes slowly moved his hand closer to Coco's face, which made her even more distressed. She closed her eyes and said in her mind that she did not want to forget her mother. Fortunately, someone suddenly flew toward Aestes, and it turned out to be Riche, who nonchalantly rushed in to stop the erasure of Coco's memory. Coco was also greatly shocked when she opened her eyes, and right after that the silver-white capture pennants suddenly ignited. The flames crawled toward Coco, and the pennants were completely burned, causing them to snap and drop the two of them. Before they could hit the hard ground, a large cloud-like substance appeared beneath them, allowing them to land safely on it. Coco and Agat immediately recognized that it was the serpent's bed of sand. Tatia then stepped in front of the two of them and shouted that it was rather mean of the Knights Moralis not to listen to what they had to say. Aestes asked one of his comrades who they were, to which the man replied that they were just children, then added that it seemed they had burned the pennants. Riche then landed on the ground and said that she agreed with Tatia. She explained that there was nothing she hated more than adults who treated children like things instead of people. Tatia then said that it was a good thing she had practiced that spell, and she commented that she had never imagined she would use it to save her friends. She then asked if they were all right, to which Coco happily said that they were and thanked her. Because of that, Tatia thanked her in return and said that she would have the strength to do anything if it meant hearing Coco thank her. Aestes then said while holding his pennants that what mattered was not the circumstance, but the fact that the principles had been violated. He clipped them back onto their rod, and the burn marks began to vanish as they reattached to their base. While doing so, he said that the order they had in that world hung on a very fragile balance. He added that they continued to enjoy peace only because all witches carefully upheld the principles. If that balance were to break, everything would come crashing down at once. Therefore, he said, no exceptions could be made. However, before Aestes could move again, a blade suddenly pointed at his cheek from behind. It was Kifri, and he said that for someone who refused to listen, he certainly liked to talk. In a serious tone, he added that he would appreciate it if he kept his hands off his apprentices while calling him by his name. Aesthees then realized that those 4 belonged to him as he moved his rain cleaver away from his face. He commented that it was fitting and said that their impertinence strongly resembled that of their master. Kifri replied that it was better for them to become like him than to become like Aesthees, especially if that was how the knights conducted their duties. Aesthees said that they merely sought order and told him to look at the devastation below, then asked if he would still claim that the girl posed no threat. He explained that it took powerful magic to alter the very shape of the land. The floating mountains of the Dada range, the shadow forest of Thristas, and all such abominations were the result of spells of war composed during the days of chaos before the pact. He added that if such magic were to consume the land again, it would only be reasonable to bring the caster to justice. As he returned the rain cleaver to its sheath, Kifri replied that perhaps that was true, but said that wiping a person's mind without first hearing what it had to say was rash at best. Besides, he added that the strength of a spell was determined by the size and precision of its composition. He also said that he certainly did not recall bestowing upon his apprentices the skill or tools necessary to perform feats on such a scale. Aesthees then said that perhaps Kifri had not done that, but what about the brimmed caps, which immediately caught Kifri's attention. The two of them stared at each other after that, until Arujo shouted at them to get their attention. He said they could go ahead and argue with each other all they wanted, but he hoped they had not forgotten their duty as witches. He then asked if they remembered the saying, "Bring the blessing of magic to the people," and pointed out that those young girls seemed to have a far better handle on that than all of them. Agat then asked the old man if he was injured, to which he replied that he was fine and thanked her, explaining that it was only sand after all. Coco then apologized to the woman there for how everything had turned out while helping her stand, but she asked why she was apologizing. She pointed out that Coco and Agat had saved Custis from the river and that they deserved thanks, not blame. Arujo then said to the Knights Moralis that perhaps they should put those pennants of theirs to good use instead of letting them float up there, which made them silently look at him. Before long, they followed his suggestion and began helping the people in need. On Custis's side, one of the Knights Moralis wrapped her pennant around his legs. Dagda asked if that would heal his wounds, to which the woman replied that it would not and explained that she had only stopped the bleeding. She then said that she would take him to Caln now, adding that with swift attention from a doctor his life should not be in danger, but Dagda suddenly grabbed her arms and asked why she refused to heal Custis. He pointed out that he had seen how she repaired the pennants, how the charred and tattered pieces were restored through magic. He then asked if he was right that she could do the same for the boy, insisting that their magic must be capable of that, but the female knight said that it was not possible. She removed her arm from Dagda's grasp after that while he shouted that he did not believe her, but she calmly asked him to remove his hand, then asked whether he would prefer that she not carry Custis to Caln, which worried Dagda. Because of that, Dagda calmed himself and bowed while asking her to forgive him, then surrendered Custis to them and said that the child was in her care. After the people's carriage began moving again toward their destination, Aesthees said that other sections of the riverbank might still collapse. So he instructed his men that once the rescues were complete, they were to seal off the area for safety, allowing only witches to enter. He added that once all the outsiders were gone, then the questioning could resume, and he looked at Coco as he said this while Coco looked back at him. A while later, they asked Coco to draw the seal she had drawn earlier, and after she did so, Kifri asked if that was the seal she had drawn by the river, to which she replied yes. Aesthees then picked up a rock and placed it near the seal, and when the rock touched it, part of it began turning into sand. He commented that it was an ordinary seal straight out of the primer, while Coco began explaining that it had been the same when she saved Custis and that only the part of the rock that touched the seal had turned into sand. Arujo then said that it was not exactly the kind of spell capable of destroying an entire riverbank, to which Kifri replied that it was not. Aesthees then ordered Coco to show him her hands, which confused her and made her ask what for as she slowly presented them. Aesthees immediately grabbed her by the wrist and explained that on occasion the brimmed caps were known to tattoo seals onto their own skin. He said that it was a forbidden art used to strengthen or alter their bodies, or to increase the force of their magic. When he opened her palm, Aesthees was surprised by what he saw. He carefully examined Coco's hand and thought inwardly that these were simply the ink-smeared, calloused fingers of a child who was only beginning to learn how to cast. Kifri then stepped in and asked if he had seen enough, to which Aesthis scoffed while turning away. He began floating into the air while informing them that he would file a report of the incident to the Great Hall and that they should expect a formal investigation. He then said that if they found evidence that Coco was involved with the brimmed caps, he would make sure that her age would not protect her from the repercussions. He suggested that they tread carefully and be mindful not to forget the lesson from this incident. Once the Knights Moralis had left, Kifri let out a sigh of relief and commented that the situation had made him nervous. He also said he was thankful that everyone was all right. He added that it had been a mistake for the two of them, the older ones, to leave at the same time, and he apologized to his apprentices for that. But Tatia insisted that it was not his fault. That said, Kifri called Coco and Agat and told them that they must understand that what they had done was extremely dangerous. If anyone were to discover the secret of magic, they would be forced to erase the memories of every person they had saved. He added that the human mind was different for each individual, containing an accumulation of matters unique to every person. Each mind held knowledge, experience, their past, and the very life of that individual. And he said that the actions they had taken had put those treasures at risk. Agat apologized to him, and Coco said that they would be more careful next time, to which Kifri said that he hoped they would, because he would rather never see anyone's memories erased unless it was truly necessary. They were surprised to hear him say that, and in Agat's mind she thought that she was now even farther from the test than she had been before. Suddenly, Kifri said that he must admit that the two of them had managed to pull off quite an impressive rescue, and then informed Agat that he would submit an application for her to take the second test, which shocked her. He explained that if she passed, she would be considered ready to accompany them on work in the outside world, and added that he had seen the bird of light she had drawn to help save the boy, commenting on how magnificent it had looked. Kifri then asked if she could promise not to cast in front of others until after she passed, to which Agat almost responded with a joyful shout, but quickly restrained herself, and with a glowing smile, she told her master yes. Tatia then complained that it was unfair and asked if Agat was really the only one who could take the test, while she grumbled about what that meant for the rest of them. Kifri explained to them that the three of them had not yet reached the end of their basics of casting primer, which left Tatia speechless. Riche brushed it off, saying she could not stand tests anyway, and Coco became worried when she realized that they had more than one test to take. Orujo then called out to Kifri and asked if he was sure that was a good idea, saying that he thought he was worried about Agat's haste, to which Kifri replied that he was still worried, but it troubled him more when she became isolated, when she was separated from them. He looked at his four apprentices as they laughed and bonded after their rescue mission and added that it did not seem to be the case now, so he was inclined to think that he should trust Agat to do the right thing. Orujo commented that it sounded a bit lax, to which Kifri replied that a teacher ought to be like that when their student was hard on themselves. Agat then approached them and told Kifri that she wanted them to go home quickly so she could continue her exercises, but Kifri said to wait a moment. He said that there was still one more matter they needed to attend to in that place. On the side of the Knights Moralis, one of the members asked Aesthis if he was truly fine with their decision. The man explained that Kifri's new apprentice was the same girl everyone had been talking about. Just as he was about to say something about whether the rumors were true, Aesthis replied that he had no intention of letting that matter lie. He then asked his colleague whether they had any evidence to confirm the rumors, to which the knight replied no, and said that there was no way they would recover anything from that petrified home. Because of that, Aesthis said that extracting her confession was their only choice, and he invited his colleague to observe their surroundings. He explained that the spell was causing the entire lower portion of the river to dry up, and that just as a single loose stone could cause a whole bank to collapse, the entire river was diverted and the change was carried all the way downstream. When it was done, the beauty that once existed there would be lost to time. He then said that the girl Coco was a loose stone, and if there was even the slightest chance of her becoming dislodged, they must stop at nothing to remove her from their river. As he explained this, the scene returned to Coco and her friends, where Coco was amazed at the bridge of sand that Orujo was creating. Kifri asked if she had noticed the special type of pen he was using and explained that it could sear seals directly into the surfaces of rock and wood. It was then explained that the object was called a sear needle wand, a wand with a needle-like tip that heated up through magic allowing it to etch casting seals onto surfaces such as metal, stone, wood, and leather. Orujo told them that what he had done was only a temporary fix, but that the seal would provide the final support. When Kifri looked at one part of the river, he said that the water seemed to be flowing there again. He wondered if the rending spell there was already wearing off, which made him curious. He noticed Coco's cone hat there with a small bottle of conjuring ink beside it, so he picked it up and examined it. He called Coco over and told her that she had dropped it, which surprised her. He calmly told her that she needed to be more careful because they could not leave conjuring ink lying around anywhere. Coco bowed and apologized deeply while thanking him for finding it. Coco then commented that it seemed odd, which also made Kifri curious about her reaction. She explained that she had used that ink when they fought the dragon the previous day and had also used it just now, yet the bottle was still full as if she had never touched it. Coco began to feel astonished and wondered if the ink pot she was holding was some kind of magic ink pot, asking if it refilled itself every time it was used. Kifri called her name to get her attention and asked if he could examine it. As she handed it over, she asked what was wrong and whether there was a problem. Kifri's expression began to grow troubled as he examined the strange conjuring ink bottle, and suddenly the scene shifted to a place by the sea where several stones were lined up like grave markers. On one of those stones sat the mysterious witch who belonged to the brimmed caps. There, he uttered the words Fae and said that magic was the falsehood that made their world vibrant. He added that his hands, which produced beautiful spells, were thoroughly stained with poison. And yet, he said while squeezing a sharp object in his hand and letting his blood drip into a small bottle resembling Coco's conjuring ink, that no lie could survive close scrutiny. He then wondered how long that deception could truly be maintained. After that, the scene returned to Coco and Kifri, and here Kifri asked Coco if that ink was the one she had obtained from Mr. Nalnoa in Calm, to which Coco said that was correct and explained that the bottle was very small, so it was easy to carry. She also asked if there was something wrong with her ink, but Kifri simply called Orujo and asked him to bring his apprentices back to the Atelier for him, which puzzled him and made him ask where he planned to go. Kifri then placed his hand on Coco's shoulder and cheerfully said that because of all the commotion the previous day, he had not been able to buy Coco a wand. Calm was close by, he said, and there could not be a better chance to take her there. Orujo said that he should make sure to bring him a bottle of silver nectar wine as a souvenir, to which Kifri replied that he would bring him a bottle of First Flush and a bottle of Aged. Orujo said that sounded good and that he would expect those, but Kifri suddenly asked if he was the one who would be paying for it, which irritated him. Kifri then whispered to Coco that he was sorry she had gotten caught up in that, but explained that there was something he needed to check there. After a short while, the two of them arrived at the Starry Sword, the magic stationers in Calm, but when they went to the shop, Coco noticed with confusion that the door had disappeared. She asked if there had not been a door there, while Kifri muttered drat, and said that it seemed the shop was closed today. Kifri began feeling along the wall after saying that, while Coco was surprised to realize that when the store was closed, the door itself disappeared. Kifri thought that perhaps the skylight was still there, but he wondered inwardly whether it would count as breaking and entering if he went in through that way. Tarta then arrived there and called out to Kifri with a greeting, and he also remembered Coco. Kifri said that he was glad to see him and informed him that he needed to see Nalnoa. Tarta agreed and said to wait a moment while he took something from his bag. He pulled out an entire doorknob and said that he would open the shop. When he did so, a door appeared from the flat wall, and he invited Kifri to come inside. Once they entered, Coco commented that it looked very different from the other day, and Tarta pointed out that obviously if a different doorknob was used, they would enter a different room. While arranging his things, he said that his grandfather was probably on the 3rd floor. When Coco was about to go upstairs as well, Tarta told her that it would be better for her to wait downstairs, and said that he had not yet gotten her name, so she introduced herself to him. Tarta memorized it, and then pointed out that, well, he should probably take a look at the scratch on her ankle sooner rather than later. Coco looked at it and thought that she had not even noticed she had hurt herself. Tarta removed his hat and cloak after that and told her to follow him to the back, saying that they had some tranquillife there that he could apply to the wound, but that he would excuse himself first. While walking around the shop, Coco was amazed and commented inwardly that there were so many components there that she had never seen before. She picked up a jar and happily said that it was beautiful, then asked what those colorful powders were. Tarda told her while preparing what he would apply to her ankle not to disturb them, and pointed out that everything there was arranged in a specific order. He informed her that all the powders there were magic dyes, things that could be mixed with ink in order to achieve certain effects. On Kifri's side, he had already reached the 3rd floor, and there he excused himself to Nalnoa, who seemed busy at his desk. Nalnoa was surprised by his arrival and pointed out that the shop was closed today, to which Kifri replied that he was aware of that, but still. Nalnoa said that it was not as if he minded and added that he could guess what he was looking for. He apologized and said that if it was about the cobblestone from the other day, he still had no idea. He explained that he had tried every spell he could think of to isolate the dyes, but the substance was stubborn, pointing out that it simply melted away into nothing. He also said that he had turned his storehouse inside out looking for components that matched, but he had not found anything. Nalnoa then asked Kifri if he had found any clues on his end, to which Kifri replied that actually he had come across something that he would like him to take a look at. He then took out the conjuring ink that Coco uses, and it immediately caught Nalnoa's attention. Nalnoa examined it carefully, and his eyes widened in shock. He pointed out that the ink was the same as the one on the cobblestone. He added that it had a slight tinge of blue, then asked Kifri where he had found it. Nalnoa was then startled again when he realized that the ink pot was one of his own, which prompted Kifri to remark that his suspicion had indeed been correct. Kifri then explained what he had been thinking, recalling the day they faced the dragon, and said that the brimmed caps had most likely cast a spell on that ink pot. Kifri then laid several sheets of paper on Nalnoa's table, causing the old man to stand up and ask what he was doing. Nalnoa tried to stop him as he opened the ink and told him that he should not draw with it until they understood what was behind it. Despite Nalnoa calling out to him, Kifri ignored him and began to draw, and while that was happening, the scene shifted back again to Coco and Tarda. There, Coco asked Tarda what the seafoam-colored one was that she saw, and what the tall object was that she was looking at. She also pointed to the large jar near the ceiling, and Tarda informed her that it contained powder from an azure moonflower. If she mixed it into ink, he explained, it would extend the duration of a spell. She then asked what the white sparkly one on the other side was, so Tarda told her that those were the scales of the blushing bride. He explained that it was a type of butterfly, and that it made the ink transparent, allowing seals to be hidden in plain sight. The ones hanging up, he added, were filled with ground roaming scallop shells, which prevented the ink from spreading when it became wet. He then explained that ground scales from a golden blaze worm were what caused the ink to glow in the dark. While Tarda continued treating Coco's wound, Coco looked around the room and commented that everything there was so wonderful. After that, she could not hold back her inner magic fangirl and added that Tarda knew so much, then asked if he could name every dye in that entire room. Tarda agreed and said that it was their trade and that it was actually quite fun to browse the catalog. Tarda then brought out the catalog he was referring to, and when Coco opened it, she was filled with awe. She then hugged it tightly while saying that she wished she could live in a stationer's shop. She pointed out that she became excited just by seeing the entire wall filled with shelves and jars, and called Tarda lucky. Because of that, Tarda asked what she was talking about and pointed out that living in the Atelier was far better, adding that she had rather strange ideas for a witch. Coco then became confused and said that she had thought he was an apprentice as well. Tarda's mood shifted slightly as he was about to clarify that, and he clenched his right thigh. He brushed it off afterward and asked if Coco was finished with the catalog because he needed it now, but Coco did not respond as something else caught her attention again. She pointed to several jars and said that she wanted to open that red powder, asking what its name was. Tarda then asked which one she meant while helping her climb the small ladder, to which she answered while pointing to a specific jar on the shelf between the seafoam-colored powder and the one that looked like dried leaves. Tarda then told her to count it and asked which shelf she was referring to and how many spots from the left it was located. Coco became confused by that and pointed out that the red color clearly stood out. Suddenly, a massive flash of light occurred inside the shop, startling them both, and because of it Coco stumbled while standing on the ladder. She grabbed onto the shelf of powders, which caused a large number of jars to fall. They also heard loud thuds coming from where it happened, and they immediately covered their heads and looked toward it. Tarda wondered what that light was and commented that it had been incredibly bright, while Coco said that it had really startled her, then asked Tarda if he was okay. Coco then said that it was a good thing none of the jars had broken. But even so, Tarda's face was full of distress, and he asked if she was joking because it looked awful. The powders had scattered everywhere, and the labels had come off. He explained that they did not tie the labels because his grandfather rearranged them from time to time, and he had told him not to touch anything there, yet now they should look at what had happened. Coco apologized and said that they could still return them to their original containers, adding that she would help him. However, she became a bit worried and explained that the catalog only showed pictures of the original ingredients. She then added that Tarda should still know which powder was which. As Coco was about to say that Tarda should be able to tell which color came from which ingredient, Tarda suddenly shouted that he could not do that. Because of that, Coco tried to point out that he had just been explaining those things earlier, so Tarda clarified that he had simply memorized them according to the order on the shelves. He added that he could not actually notice the difference between one color and another, which puzzled Coco. Tarda then apologized to her for shouting and said that he would just explain what had happened with his grandfather. His grandfather would be able to sort everything properly, so she should just go home. As Coco was about to object, Tarda suddenly handed her cone hat back to her and told her not to take it the wrong way, but she could not help with this. Everyone had things they could do and things they could not. Tarda himself was like that as well. Even if he studied his entire life, he would never become a witch because of his stupid silver wash. While that was happening, the scene shifted to Kifri and Nalnoa. As Kifri lay on the floor after being struck by that extraordinary flash of light, Nalnoa told him that he could see it now and said that he had told him it was a bad idea, then asked if he was all right. Kifri did not respond immediately, so Nalnoa told him to speak. After a moment, Kifri said that he could not believe how powerful that light had been and pointed out that the seal he had drawn was extremely small. He said that it must certainly be a twin bottle spell, separate bottles that shared the same contents. He speculated that there was likely a fragment of glass inside, one that contained a small seal. And he added in his mind, their intention had been for Coco to draw using that ink. Each time she dipped her pen into the ink, the liquid would be replaced with an unknown mixture. However, that also meant that the bottle was linked to them. He was amazed and excited by that discovery and shouted that at last he had obtained the lead he had been waiting for. He quickly stood up and went to Nalnoa's desk, leaving Nalnoa completely stunned by his reaction. Nalnoa shouted in disbelief as Kifri told him that the power had been drawn from a tiny and crudely drawn seal, insisting that ink like that did not belong in their world. He said that the matter was beyond him and that they needed to bring it to the Great Hall, but Kifri immediately opposed the idea and said that they must not do that. He shouted that he could not allow that conjuring ink to fall into the hands of the Order or the Great Hall, and that they must not spread what they had discovered to anyone. Nalnoa grew worried at the way Kifri was behaving and told him to listen to himself. Nervously, he asked if Kifri realized what he was saying, then asked in the name of all that was sacred what he intended to do with that ink. Kifri then took something from his pocket, and after preparing it, he apologized to Nalnoa and said that he hoped he could forgive him. A short while later, the scene shifted outside the shop, where Coco was seen waiting while sitting on the railing of the bridge. While she waited, someone called out to her, and when she looked she saw that it was Kifri. He apologized for making her wait. He explained that it seemed the small ink pot was a very expensive item and that it had accidentally been given to her. To make up for it, he had bought her a witch's belt and handed it to her. When Coco put it on, her smile was clearly visible as Kifri explained that it was a useful belt for hanging a wand and an ink pot. It also came with a clip that allowed a palm quire to be attached to the side of her dominant hand. While they were walking, something caught Coco's attention, and it turned out to be Tardo waving goodbye to her from the window of the shop, which made her look back at him. She then called out to Kifri and asked what silverwash was. Kifri looked at her and began to explain that silverwash syndrome was an affliction of the eyes. He added that it was a condition present from birth that caused the entire world to appear as though it were bathed in silver. He also said that witches tended to place great importance on visual acuity, and commented that he imagined it must be a difficult world for Tarda to live in, and that refusing to accommodate differences was not an admirable quality of witch society. Coco had no smile on her face, and Kifri noticed that. So he lifted her onto his shoulders and told her not to let such melancholy cloud her face, comforting her by saying that everything would be all right. He explained that as long as she was a student of his atelier, he would do everything in his power to protect her. Therefore, he added, she did not have a single thing to worry about. After they left, Tarda approached Nalnoa and apologized for the mess they had made. He explained that he had been startled by the flash of light and had knocked the jars over. He then asked what that light had been and whether it was some spell cast by Kifri. However, Nalnoa seemed not to understand his question. He turned to Tarda and asked what he was talking about regarding a flash of light, which shocked Tarda and left him in deep confusion about what had actually happened. The next day, while watching his grandfather continue his day-to-day routine of selling items in his shop, Tarda commented inwardly that the light that had appeared was blinding, and he also wondered how Nalnoa had not seen it. He then began to think whether Kifri might be able to tell him why his grandpa could not remember it, or perhaps Kifri himself was the reason why he could not. While that was happening, we were then shown Kifri observing a vast stretch of land. He was holding several papers, scrolls, and books in his hands as he did so. It turned out that his 3 apprentices were also with him there: Riche, Coco, and Tetia. Coco apologized to Kifri profusely here while holding a sheet of paper with a seal on it. That was because the seal had caused a small tree to fly toward Kifri, which made him fall face first onto the ground. And because of that, Coco kept bowing repeatedly to apologize. Kifri then said that it seemed the grasping wind seal Coco had drawn was a bit too large for picking wild apples. Coco explained that she had drawn it that large on purpose. The first one had been so small that it had barely managed to move the leaves. Tetia then pointed out what if she placed the signs of pulling at an angle. She told Coco to think about it. When picking an apple by hand, she explained, it becomes easier if you twist it around the stem. As the difference in the possible effects of drawing the signs in different ways was shown, Kifri commented that it was a clever adjustment and explained that a spell could be adapted to almost any kind of situation if the signs were carefully arranged to suit the specific goal. Tetia then said that if something did not work, Coco should think about why it did not work. In fact, even if something did work, she should still stop and consider why. The entire point of repeating things again and again, she said, was to smooth out the imperfections. Coco needed to be proactive in her training, she added, then asked Kifri, their master, if that was correct, to which Kifri replied, while replanting the wild apple tree that had flown into him, that he could not have said it better himself. After that, Kifri said that she was quite the able teacher, which shocked Tetia. Tetia glowed and blushed at the idea that she was being called Master Tetia and a teacher. She began jumping and cheering while saying that it was simply too much, but she wanted Kifri to say it again. Then suddenly a strong gust of wind passed through the wild apple tree that Kifri had planted earlier, and it turned out that Agat was the one who had done it. She used the adjustment that Tetia had explained in order to neatly pluck a single wild apple from the tree and send it flying into her hand. She scoffed after doing that and asked Tetia if she really had time to be advising others. She explained that if Tetia knew how far she still had to go, she might want to prioritize her own studies instead. Because of that, Coco and Tetia looked at her silently, but before long the two of them looked at each other and grinned at the idea. They began running toward Agat, while Tetia enthusiastically agreed with her about practicing, then said that she could show them some examples, which shocked Agat. Kifri laughed from the side while watching them and commented that it was a nice, easygoing day. Meanwhile, Agat told her peers that what she had said was not meant to draw the two of them over there. She added that she was far too busy preparing for her test to play around, but Coco and Tetia did not stop approaching her. After a while, they eventually finished their playful commotion. While they were eating wild apples, Coco asked Kifri if there were many other tests aside from the one she had taken at the Dada range, and aside from the consent of the crown. With a tired tone and expression, Riche told her that yes, there were 5 more. 5 entire dumb and pointless tests. She also commented that they did not even need them to learn how to draw, which made Kifri fall silent for a moment. He clarified that the purpose of a test was to provide an opportunity for them to measure and understand their own abilities. He added that whether those tests would be meaningful depended on them and on how they chose to perceive them. Of course, he said, it would be difficult to find enjoyment in a test that one did not choose to take of one's own will, and apparently the witches of old had once faced the same troubles as well. He also said that magic exists in order to bring happiness to people. He added that if it begins to cause apprentices to suffer, then its true purpose has already been lost from sight. That, he explained, was why the three wise ones decided to create a set of tests that apprentices themselves would want to take. He opened the scroll he was carrying and spread it out in the middle of the four of them, saying that the set he was referring to was a series of adventures in the outside world. It was then revealed that what he had brought was a massive map of the Pinnacle of Proving, Zoxa Peninsula, the land of the Pact. There they saw the 5 tests they would need to complete and the places they would need to go in order to do them. The first test was the consent of the crown, which carried the phrase secure consent and become an apprentice. The second test was the sincerity of the shield, which bore the words demonstrate your devotion to walk aside your teacher. The third test was the query of the Kavive, where it was said that the key shall come to one whose path is right. The fourth test was the goodwill of her grace, where the words stated that one stands unaided when hope is realized. And the fifth test was the words of the wise, where the saying was the teachings now come from thee. Kifri explained that those were the 5 tests of the witch's pinnacle of proving. Coco commented that she understood, and that in that case the first thing one had to do was become an apprentice. Kifri then said that as they progressed through each level, the range of work they were permitted to perform with their magic would expand. It was then shown how the levels of their tests progressed, starting from the right where they would choose their teacher, followed by permission to cast spells in public, then approval to attempt the librarian's trial, after that graduation from their teacher's side, and finally the ability to take on apprentices of their own. Kifri added that those who wished to take on apprentices would proceed to the final stage, while Arujo extended the explanation by saying that those who did not wish to do so could stop at the 4th step. Kifri added that upon completing the goodwill of her grace, they would graduate from their teacher's atelier and be recognized as a witch in their own right. And upon completing the query of the Kavive, they would become eligible to attempt the librarian's trial. This caught Coco's attention and made her ponder it. While looking at the map, she said inwardly that the place looked as though it might be somewhere out in the sea. She considered it carefully while Kifri explained that of course the last test was only for those who wished to take on apprentices, and pointed out that they still had a long way to go before they needed to start thinking about graduation, which caused Tatia to exclaim and ask if he was joking. She jumped onto the map and said that she thought about what she would do after graduation all the time. She added that she would travel to faraway places and use her magic to help all kinds of people, and that she wanted to hear what words of thanks sounded like in every language around the world. Tatia then reenacted a scene using both her hands, and said that what she meant was something like that, one person thanking and the other being thanked. She continued by saying that it meant happiness for 2 people from a single spell, and asked if there could be anything better than that. She happily raised her hands while showing the number 2 and saying 2 birds with 1 stone, 2 needs with 1 deed, and happiness arrives made up in pigtails. She added that she could hardly wait to grow up, and that she would design her outfit with a special cap that had 2 points. Coco commented with sparkling excitement that she had never realized there was so much meaning behind Titia's style, while Kifri was slightly taken aback and said that she was right, that they would get to design their own cap once they became full-fledged witches. Riche then suddenly stood up, catching Coco's attention, and declared that she hated tests. Annoyed, she walked up the field where they were sitting while saying that they were stupid and that she had no intention of dealing with them. She also said that she did not want others telling her to draw spells she had no desire to draw. Agat then replied that if the only spells she ever drew were the ones she wanted, she would never learn how to cast anything new, which caused Riche to stop and stare at her. After a while, Riche continued walking away while saying so what, adding that she did not care. If becoming a proper grown-up meant that you had to do things you did not want to do, then she would rather remain the person she was now. She then said that she was heading back inside their atelier, while the others simply watched her with concern. Agat then said that she could not stand remaining the person she was now, living alongside all the things she still could not do. Almost as the complete opposite of Riche, she declared that she would take every test as soon as she possibly could, and one day, she would become a librarian at the Tower of Tomes, which caught Coco's attention. In fact, Agat added that she would be happy if she could grow old during those times. Tatia then whispered to Coco that Agat came from a long line of witches. She explained that their family traced back to one of the apprentices who carried on the knowledge of the three wise wands, and that the head of their family always served as a librarian. Coco turned to Agat as Tatia recalled what it was called and said that it was known as the House of Arclom. In Coco's mind, she thought that meant the two of them had their sights set on the Tower of Tomes. Tatia then asked Coco how about her and what kind of witch she wanted to become. Coco replied that she had started from a different place compared to the three of them, and the things she had to accomplish had already been decided for her. She thought that if she began thinking about everything she needed to do, the list would never end. So she told Tatia that for now, she would just focus on learning more spells. She then cheerfully encouraged them to do that, and said she was ready to give the grasping wind another try, which made Tatia cheer for her as well, while Kifri told her she could do it. Kifri added that they should draw so that they may remember, and remember so that they may use. And while observing his apprentices, he said that the power she cultivated within herself in this way would become an ally that never betrays. After that, the scene suddenly shifted to a dark place, where Coco looked around in confusion as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. She wondered where her companions had gone when it had become so dark, and asked herself if night had already fallen. She then heard a voice calling her name and drawing her attention. When she turned, she saw that it was her mother, smiling warmly at her. Coco immediately ran toward her while calling out to her, and overcome with both joy and sadness, she embraced her while apologizing and saying that everything was her fault. She said that she had never intended to hurt her, and that she had simply been consumed by magic. Suddenly, her mother's body turned to stone, and in an eerie tone she asked Coco if she could see now, reminding her that she had told her that magic was not meant for ordinary people. Coco fell to the ground in shock and distress, and the ground beneath her suddenly turned into water. Agat then appeared behind her and called her an ignorant outsider. She questioned Coco's claim that she had not intended what happened to her mother, asking if that was the same as saying she had not intended to place all of them in danger. She repeated Coco's own words about not intending to turn her mother into stone and said that all of it was her fault. She then said that they had nothing to do with the brimmed caps there, which shocked Coco even more. She added that all of them had things they were capable of doing and things they were not capable of doing. And while hearing those words, Coco decided to run away. As those words seemed to chase after her, Agat added that no exceptions could be made, and that was why magic was kept secret to prevent things like that from happening. Coco suddenly stepped into a deep pool of water that nearly drowned her, though she managed to lift herself back up to the surface. However, she then found herself trapped inside an ink pot. While she was stuck there, a member of the brimmed caps appeared and said that this was the result of chasing after magic. All the tragedies that occurred would fall upon her shoulders, and when the world eventually collapsed, that burden would belong to her as well. The bottle she was inside began to fall, and before long it shattered when it struck the ground. Coco woke from that nightmare, breathing heavily and clearly shaken. She sat upright in her bed, and it was revealed that the sound of shattering had come from a broken candle holder. Her grip tightened on the bed as her hand trembled with fear, and the brush buddy tried to comfort her by rubbing its cheeks against her hand. She then loosened her grip and hugged herself while still trembling from the nightmare. While this was happening, Kifri was shown laying out several scrolls and sheets of paper on the floor, but when he suddenly heard a noise, he quickly hid them beneath his long robe. It turned out that Agat had arrived, prompting Kifri to remark that she was still awake, and Agat explained that she needed extra time to study. Kifri replied that every witch needed rest, to which Agat agreed and said she was heading to bed. Agat went up to her room and saw Coco drawing seals. She commented that Coco was still awake as well, and Coco replied that she could not sleep. Agat scoffed at that and said, "Is that so?" before heading back downstairs. In Coco's mind, she kept recalling Kifri's words telling them to draw so that they may remember, and remember so that they may use. She wondered how much more she would need to learn before she could save her mother. Meanwhile, the scene returned to Kifri, who looked up at the moonlight shining down upon him through the opening in the small tower of their atelier. He then pressed a sheet of paper bearing a seal onto the wall and slid it to the left, causing the wall to completely seal the entrance behind him. After that, he released the paper and walked toward the center of the room. He pulled something out from his clothing, revealing the infinite conjuring ink bottle. Raising it up, He said how long he had waited for this, longing for the day it would finally come. He then began explaining that the last ones to resist the Wise One's edict that magic should not be cast upon the body were the righteous witches of healing craft, whose only wish had been to use their spells to cure. It was also said that the magic of the twin bottles had been devised by those healers as a way to share their potions, a marvel of witchcraft that vanished along with their memories. A small medallion inside each bottle kept the vessel's contents evenly divided, no matter how far apart the bottles were from each other. In this way, the witches ensured that no one would be without an essential tonic in times of need. Kifri explained that it was an ancient instrument of medicine, a work of great precision and a kind of magic that had not been seen since the days of the Pact. He added that it was ironic that only the brimmed caps were capable of producing it today. He also said how much he admired that conjuring ink bottle, but admitted that he feared he would have to dismantle it, as it was the only way he could find them. He thought it would be best to leave the ink alone for now, since its unknown powers posed too great a risk. He added that what he truly needed to obtain was the etched medallion hidden inside, though he wondered whether he would be able to remove it without the owner of the twin bottle discovering it. As he slowly brought the tweezers in his hand toward the ink, he thought to himself that the seal inside belonged to the brimmed caps. Once it was placed inside a guidance orb, it would point the way to every detail it represented, the source of its materials, the place where it had been fashioned, and even its owner. With intense focus, he carefully removed the seal from inside the bottle, while thinking that it was a tiny clue that would lead him to the next, and a greater hint as to where those people were hiding. Unfortunately, the moment Kifri lifted the seal to the surface of the ink, a powerful electric shock suddenly burst out from it, forcing him to shield his face. He was shocked when bolts of lightning flew out from it, and he quickly realized that the brimmed caps had already noticed what he was doing. He grabbed the sheet of paper bearing the seal he had prepared earlier and swiftly slid it across the floor before lifting it upward to create a barrier against the barrage of lightning bolts flying toward him. The impact was so strong that the ink pot was knocked away and tipped over, causing the contents inside to begin leaking out. However, instead of ink, what poured out began to turn into water, which greatly alarmed Kifri. In the next moment, an enormous surge of water burst out from the room he was in, and it quickly became clear that the entire space had filled with swirling water. Kifri was dragged around violently by the powerful current, which gradually began tightening and focusing its force toward the center. As he spun helplessly in the water and nearly drowned, he thought that he had not been prepared for this and that he had been a fool. As long as he was underwater, his magic was useless. The ink pot began to crack during the chaos, and at the same time the whirlpool forming in the room began to lose its solidity. Kifri slowly started to drown, unable to do anything but be carried along by the current. But fortunately, the water soon began to vanish and return back into the ink pot. Once it had fully returned, a completely exhausted Kifri collapsed onto the floor while coughing heavily. When he opened his eyes, he saw a member of the brimmed caps floating before him. When he noticed the eyeball attached to the figure's cone hat, he immediately realized that it was the same which Coco had encountered. The witch picked up the ink pot from the floor, and the moment that the brimmed caps member gripped it, it was crushed and shattered. Kifri tried to move and weakly said to wait a moment. But before he could reach the maw, while saying that he was not finished with it yet, the brimmed caps member gradually disappeared before his eyes, leaving his hand to slump down helplessly. Irritated, Kifri clenched his fist and cursed everything in frustration, yet he declared that he would not give up. He swore that he would take back what had been taken from him. The scene then shifted to the brimmed caps member, who was now sitting once again on one of the rocks lined along the seaside. While casually playing with the two small medallions in hand, he pondered the effort that had been made just to see that ink pot in Coco's hands, and since it had not lasted long, he remarked that it had been a waste. After catching the two medallions, the figure crushed them in the palm of the hand, and then suddenly vanished from the rock where he had been sitting. In the next scene, the night had already passed, yet Kifri and Coco still looked sleepy because of what had happened to them the previous night, something their other companions knew nothing about. Tetia was surprised that the two of them yawned at exactly the same time. When Tetia mentioned it, she also pointed out that Coco had been yawning all day, and she began to wonder if the two of them had stayed up late. Coco answered while yawning, asking why they would do such a thing. Tatia's expression suddenly lit up, and she said to wait a moment because she now understood what had happened. According to her imagination, every night the two of them must be transforming into mystical knights and fighting evil people who attacked the Atelier, which prompted Agat to remind her that transformation was forbidden. Tatia became disappointed and insisted that those kinds of things always happened in plays about the witches of old. Agat finished eating soon after that, and while standing up she said that at any rate, if Coco was so tired that she could not stop yawning, then it meant she needed more sleep. She added that for the past few days she had been staying up all night studying, which made Coco simply smile awkwardly while yawning. Coco scratched her head in embarrassment and explained that her pen just seemed to feel more inspired at night, which worried Tatia and made her say that it was not good. Tatia explained that she understood that sometimes you really wanted to study, but she pointed out that there were limits. Riche then added the saying that good magic comes from a rested mind, and also from a full stomach, while sipping her food. Tatia also pointed out that Arujo said the same thing, and he was shown with a tired expression while telling them that if they skimped on sleep when they were young, they would face many problems when they became adults. Tatia then cheerfully turned around and said she would make Coco some herby tea that would help her sleep, and she asked Kifri if he wanted some as well. Because he was already close to dozing off, Kifri's head began to fall toward the table, so Tatia called out to him again, startling him and making him shout an apology while asking what it was. That made Coco attentive as well, while Tatia explained that this was exactly what she had been talking about, a world of problems, and that it was an example of the kind of thing she did not want happening to Coco. Kifri then stood up and simply laughed it off. He asked them to forgive him because his mind had started to wander after they finished eating, and he volunteered to pour the tea himself. However, the moment he grabbed it, he burned his hand and dropped it, causing it to fall and shatter on the floor. Tatia quickly asked him with concern if he was really all right, and he agreed while still looking down at the floor. After that, he held his hands and thought inwardly that the numbness from the previous night still had not subsided. Because of what had happened, Kifri fell silent for a moment and said that it seemed he had wasted the rest of their herby tea. He added that the mess could wait until he returned. Then he grabbed his robe and said he would go out to gather more leaves. He told them to stay there and continue working on their primers. His apprentices simply stared at him, and before he could leave, he even seemed to stumble on the stairs. Tatia then commented that their master was acting strange today, while Riche boasted that it was the terror of sleep deprivation. Agat then caught Coco's attention while she was cleaning up their dishes, causing Coco to look toward her and call her over. When Agat approached, Coco asked if she had a moment, and Agat remained silent for a moment before following her. When they went to the side, Coco handed Agat the sylph shoes and said that she simply wanted to return them. Agat looked surprised when she saw them, while Coco apologized because it had taken her so long before returning them. Coco explained that she had told herself that she needed to properly draw the seals written on them before giving them back. Agat asked if that had been what Coco had been working on the previous night, which made Coco embarrassed as she admitted that it was. But she added that she was still not as skilled as the three of them, Tatia and Riche included. She also told her that if flying with those shoes was difficult, it was fine with her if she wanted to redraw the seals. Agat then showed a faint smile as she looked at her sylph shoes, before seriously asking Coco what her angle was. She asked what Coco was trying to accomplish. Agat explained that Coco had been troubling her ever since she accepted the consent of the crown. She pointed out that she pushed Coco to take the test before she was ready, yet she had not reported it to their master. She said that she could have easily spoken about it to their Watchful Eye if she had wanted to, but instead, she had said nothing about it and had even gone as far as fixing her shoes for her. She then asked Coco why, saying that she could not begin to understand what was going on in her head. Coco was slightly taken aback when she heard that, but she then answered that Agat was right. She explained that on that day, when Agat pushed her out toward the Dada range, she had felt scared and alone. She said that she could have simply sat there and waited for someone to come. But instead, she walked toward the base of those mountains and decided to try, pointing out that it had been her own choice. She added, while remembering how she gave Agat the diadem herb, that she wanted to prove that she could do it and that she was not afraid, saying that those feelings had come from within her. She said that she needed to show herself that she could overcome her problems using her own magic and find even the smallest bit of hope. Because if she did not do that, the scene showed symbolically what would happen to her, where she would be swallowed by her problems and drown. Agathe then responded by asking so what, questioning whether Coco was saying that she was the only one who had been troubled all this time. As she was about to add that Coco should not feed her that kind of nonsense, Coco's body suddenly wavered and she collapsed onto the ground, greatly shocking Agathe. Coco fell helplessly to the floor, which made Agathe shout in alarm. While that was happening, the scene shifted to Kifri's situation. He was picking a certain kind of leaf and immediately placed it in his mouth. He chewed it and spat it out, and after doing so he opened and closed his hand. He commented that it was good that his feeling had returned. He said that he hoped his apprentices had not noticed it. According to him, those four had sharp senses, and they might have already noticed something. If the secret were exposed, it would be the end of everything. He said that he absolutely had to keep what happened under wraps. Then he spoke to the brush buddy on his shoulder and caringly asked whether he would not say anything either, calling him Puff Puff. He then laughed and said that it seemed he did not care for that name, to which Puff Puff replied with a pwee sound. Kifri insisted that he thought the name Puff Puff was rather cute, but Puff Puff reacted twice again, making him realize that the name really was that bad. Someone suddenly shouted Master while swiftly approaching him. When he turned, he saw that it was Agathe, and she tackled him while flying toward him. Because of that, the two of them fell from the cliff and began tumbling downward, but Kifri quickly acted and used his grip on the ground to stop them from falling further. He told Agathe that she had startled him and asked how fast she had been flying, to which Agathe explained that the signs on her heels were too long, causing the seal's balance to be completely wrong. Kifri was fascinated by that and asked if he could take a look, but Agathe said that there was no time and that they had to go back immediately. When she explained what had happened to Coco, Kifri's eyes widened in shock, and they quickly returned to the Atelier. He carried the weakened Coco and placed her on a board that resembled a glider, and using the seal of the wind along with a long stick like a paddle, he used it to propel them forward as they hovered quickly toward the city. He told Coco to hang in there, and said that the hospital in Calne was just a little further ahead. He was deeply worried because he could feel that her fever was getting worse, so he said inwardly that she needed a doctor right away. Meanwhile in Calne, Tarda was preparing to leave his friends when one of them asked if he was already heading home. He apologized to them and explained that he needed to catch the ferry, which reminded the one who asked that he lived out on the island. One of his friends then told him to wait and asked why he was taking the ferry when he was a witch, adding that he could simply fly home, which another friend also agreed with. But Tarda brushed it off and said that there were rules and things like that. Because of that, one of his friends shouted that it was boring, while another told him that they would see him tomorrow, and he said the same as they parted ways. While running back, he thought to himself that people who did not have a clue sure liked to talk as if they did. He also said that he would be happy to fly home if he could. When he reached the corner, he was shocked to see Kifri carrying Coco, and he wondered what was going on, just as Kifri was also surprised to see him. Just as Tarda was about to ask what he was doing there, Kifri thanked him and immediately asked if that road led to the hospital. He asked Tarda to tell him right away, explaining that the only place he really knew was the island and that he rarely came to this side of town. Tarda grew worried when he saw Coco's condition, so he quickly stepped forward and said that yes, that was indeed the road to the hospital. He led the way through a shortcut, which made Kifri extremely grateful to him. After a short while, they finally arrived at the hospital, and Kifri immediately handed Coco over to the nurse. He asked them to make sure she was healed, to which the nurse replied that they would do everything they could. She told him to wait there because they would need some time. Breathing heavily, Kifri repeatedly said that he hoped she would be all right. Tarda then looked toward him, and Kifri told him that he had been a huge help today and that they had been very lucky that he knew the shortcut they had taken, which made Tarda blush. Kifri then commented that Tarda had sharp eyes and that perhaps he was accustomed to paying closer attention to things than most people, which caught Tarda's attention. Tarda gripped his knees and steeled himself, then called out to Kifri and said that there was something he needed to ask him. The surroundings fell silent because of that, and the two of them looked at each other. Tarda then added that he needed to know about something, and as he called Tarda by name, Kifri's expression seemed to turn serious for a moment, but it quickly changed again as he cheerfully said that it was a pleasure to hear it. Tarda was greatly puzzled by his reaction, and he quickly approached him and told him to feel free to ask him anything. With a sparkle in his eyes, Kifri said that he loved answering questions about magic, no matter who they came from, not just from his apprentices. So he told Tarda to go ahead and say what he wanted to learn, which left Tarda completely speechless and overwhelmed. While continuing to show pure delight, Kifri said that he recognized that look, that those were the eyes of youth that thirsted for knowledge. On Tarda's side, he grew irritated in his thoughts and wondered how he was supposed to tell him that it was not that kind of question he was going to ask, especially when Kifri seemed so overly excited. This was cut short when a nurse came out and asked if they were the ones who brought in the girl, then asked them to come with her. They entered the hospital and went to the room where Coco was staying. When they arrived, they saw Coco's condition, and the doctor explained that it was just a simple cold, likely brought on by fatigue and lack of sleep. She explained to them that it seemed Coco had been having trouble sleeping for quite some time, and with warm meals and proper rest, she would recover. She added that nonetheless, she would like Coco to stay there for the night. Kifri then thanked her, and the doctor said that honestly, she did not know what kind of training witches put themselves through, and she would not ask, but she pointed out that Coco was still just a child. She also said that the adults in her life would do well to remember that. Kifri commented that she spoke well, and then apologized to Coco. He then drew a seal on his palm quire, and small drops of water began to appear around it. He gently blew on them, and because of that, the small drops of water began to float into the air and swirl around. A look of amazement appeared on Tarda's face as he witnessed it, and several of the small drops of water drifted toward Coco. Coco seemed to feel a bit better because of that, while Kifri explained that if they were lucky, what he did might ease her fever slightly. Tarda then asked that if Coco was struggling like that, did he think it would slow down and stop before it got worse and led to collapse? To which Kifri replied that unfortunately, their bodies and minds did not always act according to what they wished. He explained that not much time had passed since Coco's abrupt introduction to their world, and on the surface she might appear cheerful, but he suspected that she felt deeply troubled inside. That caught Tarda's attention, and as he thought about what Kifri said regarding Coco's sudden introduction to their world, he grew uneasy and found it hard to believe that Coco was the outsider everyone had been talking about. Kifri then adjusted Coco's blanket and called Tarda over, reminding him that earlier, outside the hospital, he had said he had something to ask. He then said that he wondered if it would be all right for that question to wait for another day, and that perhaps now was not the best time for it. Tarda simply held his head and agreed to Kifri's request while thinking about what else he should even say. After a while, he said his goodbye and that he would be heading home, and Kifri thanked him and told him to take care. As he left the hospital, he looked back and thought to himself that for a brief moment, something about Kifri's eyes had seemed cold, but then he wondered if it had only been his imagination as he began running toward the ferry. When he arrived at the ferry, a guard stopped him and said that the boat was only for witches. He asked if he really expected him to believe that he belonged to that island, and then questioned where his pointy hat was. He said that he would not allow anyone to board without proof that they were witches. Just as Tarda was about to take his hat from his pocket, he was shocked to find that it was no longer there. He tried to talk to the guard and explained that he had taken that same ferry earlier that morning, but the guard brushed it off and sarcastically said that it was a nice story. The guard then told him to try guessing how many brats had attempted to sneak onto the island the same way he was, then shouted at him in irritation, asking if he even knew why they were so selective there, and that if anyone unwanted managed to get in, he would be the one to take the blame. So, the guard added that he should stop trying to fool the new guy. Because of that, Tarda ran away from the place, while the guard shouted at him to come back. He did not listen, and as he ran, he thought that he could not go home without his cap, so he had to find it. Later that night, the scene returned to the hospital, where the male doctor said that Coco's breathing seemed to have calmed down. He thought that she would be fine as long as she continued resting like that, to which Kifri said that it was good to hear. The male doctor then added that he must say that the air around there felt cooler compared to the rest of the hospital, and that it was refreshing, commenting that magic truly was marvelous. Kifri replied that doctors were just as marvelous, and explained that magic could not do much beyond that when it came to healing. Even so, the doctor said that it was still one tool that could aid recovery, and that it would be nice if they could make use of it as well. When Kifri heard that, his expression suddenly turned cold and eerie as he replied that yes, it certainly would be nice. Suddenly, they heard noises approaching them, and it turned out to be a man whose body looked as though it had come from a burning place. He began shouting as he hurriedly looked for doctors. He approached them and asked the male doctor if he was the only one on duty that night, then told him to hurry because he needed him to come along. While that was happening, Kifri asked what the problem was. The man shouted that a fire had broken out at the northern pub. He explained that they were trying to treat the injured, but that those drunken people were too far gone to be brought to the hospital, so they needed to go to them instead. His attention was then caught by the magic Kifri had used, and as he looked at the floating sparkles and drops of water, his face lit up with awe. He asked Kifri if he was a witch and realized that he used waterwork. He suddenly grabbed Kifri's arm and began tugging him while shouting about how lucky they were, saying that he should come help them put out the fire. He also pointed out that was what witches did, helping people in need, to which Kifri told him to wait. Kifri said that he could not leave and that he needed to stay there, but Coco suddenly spoke and said that it was okay, which caught his attention. She explained that she would just be there and sleeping, so he should go and help, because that was what witches do. Kifri fell silent for a moment at that, but then agreed. He put on his cloak afterward and told Coco that he would be back soon and that she should just rest, to which Coco smiled and waved at him as he left. In Coco's mind, she wondered why she had to act so brave and admitted that it was a little scary to be alone in that place. She felt like she might have another nightmare. The scene then shifted to Tarda's side, where he secretly entered the hospital after the doctor and Kifri had left. He slowly stepped inside while asking if anyone was there. When he did not encounter anyone, he went upstairs while thinking that he had not been able to find his cap anywhere and that this was the only place he had not checked. When he reached the hallway of the rooms, he entered Coco's room. As he was about to say that he hoped his cap was there, he was relieved to see it resting on one side. After picking it up, he let out a sigh of relief and said that was good, because now he could finally go home. Coco, who was lying down, then made a sound as if she was struggling, so he approached her and wondered if she was asleep. He said that it looked like she was having a nightmare, so he thought that he might need to wake her up. He gently called out to her and asked if she was okay and if she could wake up. Coco slowly opened her eyes while feeling weak, and she mistook Tarda for her mother. She became confused when she saw him, while Tarda blushed in embarrassment at being mistaken for Coco's mother. Flustered, Tarda explained that she had been crying in her sleep earlier, which was why he woke her. Coco smiled and said that it was a surprise, then asked why he had come back. Coco began coughing afterward, so Tarda told her not to push herself, saying that her condition might get worse. Tarda then tried to call for anyone to come check on Coco, commenting on why there was not a single doctor around, and asking where Kifri was. Coco explained that Kifri and the doctor were dealing with the fire in the north, which made Tarda uneasy when he saw it from the window. He commented that was the reason why the people he had passed earlier were in such a hurry. He cursed under his breath and wondered how long they would be gone, and whether he should go after them, while Coco continued coughing. Tarda quickly moved and said that first, they needed to find something to fight the fever. He grabbed a chair and used it to reach the cabinet, and while doing that, he asked Coco if she remembered the tranquilife he had told her about earlier. He explained that it was good for fevers and also helped suppress coughing, and that there was probably some there. When he looked at the cabinet, he found a box filled with small bottles, but because of his condition, he became troubled when he saw that none of them had labels. He said he could not believe it and questioned how there could be no labels, saying that lives were at stake with those medicines. In his mind, he thought that one seemed a bit darker than the others, then questioned whether color alone was enough for others to tell them apart. He grew irritated and shouted that here it was again, asking why people always assumed that everyone saw the world the same way. He then became disheartened and began recalling what other witches had said about his silver wash. Because of that, any complex magic was ruled out for him, no dyes, and even as a stationer, he would never truly excel. It might not be an issue now while he was still young, but later on, they would not be able to say the same. At least, they thought, his carving still showed some promise. He also remembered the words that everyone had things they could do and things they could not. That irritated him, and he also recalled being told to just focus on what he could do, and that it should be enough. He explained that a lot of dyes were made from ingredients that were also useful in medicine, He knew what those things did, if only he could tell them apart. He became even more frustrated as he thought about how it was an emergency, and yet he was useless. He added inwardly that when the world is bathed in silver, you can't even make out the possibilities in front of you. Coco then tugged at his clothes, causing him to look at her, and she asked what was wrong. While wiping his tears, he apologized and said that he could not do anything, and that Coco was the one who had to suffer. He added that at least he could get her some water. He gave Coco water to keep her hydrated, but just as he was about to tell her to sip from the vapor bubble, he realized something. He remembered that Noa used that when mixing inks. That was when he realized that by using it, he could separate solids from liquids. He removed the lids of the bottles and began extracting the liquid from all of them at once, thinking that if he did that to the solutions, he might be able to figure out what had been mixed into them. He explained that Tranquilleaf was prepared as a powder, that the herb was ground down. So first, he would figure out which of the bottle contents turned into powder once the water was removed. He began, and the first one he checked was not what he was looking for because it crystallized once the water was gone. Another one was also ruled out because it should not glow when exposed to moonlight. There was also one that remained liquid and had less content, so that was not it either. He also said that Tranquilleaf did not have much of a scent, so anything that smelled bad was ruled out as well. After that, only 3 bottles remained. He examined them carefully, but to him, they all looked exactly the same. Frustrated, he shouted that he was so close. Just a little more and he would have figured it out. But then he suddenly lost his confidence and said that this was as far as he could go. He apologized to Coco for that and explained that he had tried, but he did not think he could do it. He said that he did not even know why he had thought he could do it in the first place. He clenched the towel he had placed on Coco's head and said that he should have already known by now that it was impossible for him. Even though she was weak, Coco moved and said that what Tarda was saying was not true, which caught his attention. She said that that was what magic was for, to turn things you could not do into things you could. Coco lifted herself up and sat upright, then asked if Tarda had a pen and some ink. Tarda quickly answered yes and explained that he had been in the middle of carving. When he handed them to Coco, she immediately began to draw even though her illness was still evident. Tarda looked at her with admiration and inspiration because of that. Coco's body suddenly shivered from the cold, and Tarda noticed it. He quickly moved and covered her body with the blanket beside her. As Coco continued drawing, Tarda made sure she would not become any more uncomfortable. Tarda then asked what kind of spell she was drawing and if it would help her recover. Coco answered that it was not for her, or not just for her. She explained that it was a spell that would help the both of them, leaving Tarda confused as he tried to understand what that meant. Tarda asked what kind of spell could help them, and while Coco was drawing it, she explained that it was the sigil of earth, the symbol of might that controls the very land itself. She said that it was used for drilling tunnels and breaking boulders down into sand, and that this sigil had saved her time and time again. Tarda then asked what that had to do with their current problem. So Coco clarified that if you change the signs, the spell would change as well. She explained that the form a spell takes is determined by its signs, that if they were too long, the spell would shoot in one direction, and if the signs were set at angles, the spell would move in a spiral. She added that she thought magic was like a blank slate, that it did not resist and simply listened to her. Tarda thought about the idea of magic listening and asked what that meant, so Coco pointed to the signs. She explained that they would take the signs of crushing and draw them upside down. She said that the spell normally broke things down into small pieces, like turning stone into sand, so Tarda thought about it carefully and realized that if the signs were reversed, then the spell might try to bring the pieces back together. Coco agreed with his realization and said that she would show him the shapes, the original shapes she knew well, and that this spell was for Tarda so that it could lead him to the answer. However, when they placed one of the bottles onto the seal, what came out was only a clump of a strange substance, leaving both of them speechless. Coco immediately let go of the paper and hid under her blanket in embarrassment while repeating that magic simply listens to you. She added that if you were weak, it would only result in a mess, so Tarda tried to comfort her by saying that she had done her best. That only made her more embarrassed since it happened right after she had acted so confident, and she asked him to promise to forget what had just happened. She said that she felt even hotter now, though this time it was from embarrassment, so Tarda told her that it was really okay. He approached the seal and picked it up, then asked if all they needed to do was redraw it more carefully, to which Coco answered yes, and that they also needed to even it out. Tarda explained that he did not know much about drawing, but he was good at seeing balance. He carefully examined the seal Coco had drawn and said that he was used to it because of his work. Coco watched Tarda and remembered the first time she saw him in the shop, completely focused on what he was doing. She smiled slightly as she watched him concentrate. After a while, Tarda approached Coco and mentioned something about the signs. He asked if it would be alright to place them on the sides instead of just the top and bottom. He explained that when shaping something, you needed to look at it from every angle, and that it was the same with pens. He said that with the current structure of the seal, the powder was probably spilling out from the sides, making the shape unclear. He then apologized, thinking he might be doing something insensitive, and explained that he did not intend to rewrite Coco's spell, but Coco told him it was fine and that it was just a basic spell from the primer. She explained that if he made his own adjustments and changed how it worked, it would become his own original magic. She then urged him to try it, and Tarda agreed. He took his pen and dipped it into the ink pot, then added to Coco's drawing. Because of that, a type of leaf formed in the shape of light, and Tarda was amazed at himself for being able to do it. It disappeared shortly after, but even if it only lasted for a moment, Tarda excitedly said that it worked and commented on how amazing it was. He told Coco that he had done it with excitement, which made Coco cheer as well, but it was immediately followed by a fit of coughing, so Tarda apologized and focused again on the medicine. When he used the seal on the 2 remaining bottles he had chosen, he let out a sigh of relief because it would have been bad, since neither of those contained the tranquillife. He thought that the hospital would surely have that, and figured that they might have some inside the storehouse. Because of that, he made up his mind and immediately ran off after putting away his tools, telling Coco that he would use that seal to find tranquillife, and that he could do it if he had that magic. He quickly ran toward the storehouse, and upon entering, he moved slowly while looking around. Using a single candle as his light, he commented inwardly that it somewhat reminded him of their home. He opened each drawer he touched and used the seal to determine what was inside them, and he found various kinds of herbs such as thornbark, millflower, sea briar, sleeping willow, and drizzle beehive. He said that he recognized all of them, and that they were like images from a book. He felt delighted and commented that it was incredible. Each time he lifted the seal, it felt as though the world came into focus. Everything he had worked hard to remember was there, showing him the answer. He said that this was how great it felt to finally accomplish something he had once been unable to do. When he tried the seal on a jar he had taken, he saw the tranquillife appear with a glow, and he teared up in joy as he said that he had found it. He said that this was their stock of tranquillife and that he needed to hurry and bring some of it back to her. However, the stockroom door suddenly opened, and the female doctor caught him in the act. She told him to stop and asked what he thought he was doing, so all he could do was turn around and try to explain himself. They returned to Coco's room, where Tarda explained that there were no doctors on duty there, which made the elderly female doctor comment that it was nonsense. She explained that a hospital is never left without anyone, and questioned how he could have thought otherwise. She said that they were simply in the West Wing preparing to receive burn patients, and added that things tend to get hectic after a fire. She then said that honestly, restraining overzealous hands is precisely why they do not use labels. She explained that things could have gotten worse if the wrong medicine had been used, and that they first needed to check what Coco had already been given. Tarda apologized and explained that he had just panicked, to which the doctor said that his desire to help his friend was admirable. However, she added that herbs can become poisons just as easily as they can become medicine, so proper education is required to administer them correctly. In this case, she said that it just so happened that tranquillife was the correct choice, which caught Tarda's attention. The doctor then asked if he had been studying apothecary and whether he might be considering a path in medicine, which surprised Tarda and made him try to explain, but the doctor noticed his hat and asked if he was studying to become a witch. His eyes lit up at that, but he did not answer, while Coco also smiled when she saw his reaction. The scene then shifted to the north where the fire was taking place. Flames flew into the sky as they engulfed the nearby houses. Kifri managed to save a baby from the disaster, and as he returned the child to his mother, he commented that he was glad he made it in time, and that he never would have guessed an infant had been sleeping upstairs. The mother thanked him for keeping her baby safe and asked where they would have been without him. Kifri then noticed that other witches had arrived from the island, so he thought that he should start heading back to the hospital. As he said that he was worried about his apprentice and wanted to be by her side, the man who had brought him there suddenly wrapped an arm around his neck and asked where he was going. When Kifri tried to say that he was going back to the hospital to check on his apprentice, the man stopped him and questioned whether he was really going to leave their bar, again pointing out that the fire was still not out. He remarked with a grin that everything must be a piece of cake for witches like them, asking if all it took was a simple wiggle of their fingers for the problem to be solved. He added that this was why he needed to take the lead in times like this, while Kifri tried to explain that magic was not that simple. One of the witches who had arrived commented that outsiders had no idea, while another told him not to worry about it and urged him to leave, saying that he and his master could handle it, to which he expressed his appreciation. Kifri then flew off, and as he headed toward the hospital, he thought to himself that there was nothing easy about magic. If it were truly that simple, then they would not be troubled by sickness and suffering. When he arrived at the room where Coco was, he was surprised by what he saw, which turned out to be the two children already asleep. He covered Tarda with his cloak and checked Coco's fever, and after that, he sat beside them. The next day, Coco was able to stretch as she said that it felt much easier to breathe. The doctor said that it was good to hear that she was looking much better today, and that her fever seemed to have subsided. Coco said that the medicine must have really helped and thanked Tarda, which caught his attention. He shyly replied that actually, she should be the one being thanked. He then commented that witches were truly amazing, which Coco agreed with, saying that they really were. Tarda suddenly clarified that the one he found amazing was Coco, which surprised her as she said that what she remembered was how sloppy her spell had been. Something outside the window caught their attention, and when they looked, they saw Kifri with Nalnoa, who was calling for them to come down. When they went down, they headed to the ferry, where Nalnoa scolded Tarda, saying that he had been very worried. As Nalnoa was about to explain the events that caused his concern when Tarda did not return, Tarda immediately apologized. Nalnoa thanked Kifri for informing him, and Tarda then remembered something and said that he had wanted to ask about the bright light from the other day, which made both Kifri and Nalnoa react with confusion. That made Tarda pause, thinking that it seemed Kifri had not seen it either. Because of that, he brushed it off, thinking that it might have just been his imagination. He thought that it was not right to doubt Kifri when he himself was not even sure about it, and that he needed to examine it more carefully first. The captain of their ferry then told them that they would be departing soon, so the two of them boarded, and because of that, Kifri told Coco that it seemed they should head home as well, which Coco happily agreed to. As the boat was leaving, Tarda called out to Coco, causing her to turn back toward him. He said that he would make a pin just for her, and that he would cross the river using his own magic to deliver it, and that he promised. Coco was surprised and happily said that it sounded wonderful. With great excitement, she shouted that she could not wait, while Tarda smiled as well. Nalnoa commented that they had become friends so quickly, to which Tarda agreed, saying that there was really something special about Coco, and that he was sure she would become an even more amazing witch over time. Nalnoa was pleased to hear that and pointed out that he would be amazing as well, which made Tarda blush and laugh. After that, the scene shifted to Kifri and Coco, and as they were heading home, Coco told Kifri that a nightmare had been troubling her sleep. He explained that dreams were not easy to deal with, and that magic used to put someone to sleep was forbidden, but that they would find another way to help her. He added that all great discoveries are born of adversity. Coco thanked him, but said that she thought she would be okay. Kifri asked if she was sure and told her not to overexert herself again, to which Coco replied that she was sure. She explained that she could feel it because she had found a small glimmer of hope. She thought about the new idea she had, that if the signs were reversed, the spell would have the opposite effect, and said that if that was the case, then the same should apply even to forbidden spells. She added that all she needed to do was reverse the signs in the seal from the picture book, and that might be enough to reverse the spell that turned her mother to stone. As they were heading back, someone suddenly called Coco's name, and it turned out to be Titia and the others who had been waiting for them. She and Riche immediately ran towards them and said that they had been very worried, asking if Coco was okay and if her fever was gone. When she saw that Coco was fine, she hugged her and happily said how relieved she was, while even Agat let out a sigh of relief, though she did not approach them. Meanwhile, in the forest, someone was speaking to the mysterious brimmed cap member, who appeared to be another member as well, saying that he understood that his gift had not worked as planned. It seemed that peace had not yet made fools of them all. Even so, they could not sit idle and had to continue to act. Then, another brimmed cap member said that in that case, he supposed that he, the very embodiment of forbidden magic, would be the one to make the next move. It was revealed that this individual seemed to remove his body from plain sight as his cloak floated in the air like a phantom. He answered yes to the other brimmed cap member and explained that when the apprentices leave their teacher's protection to take the test, they would have an opportunity they could not afford to miss.